So first things first, just a little bit of housekeeping here. So some of you are already on this, which is great. Thank you. Remember, we postponed the due date for assignment 5.2. That was just doing the simple knockouts of the girl you just retouched. Everyone remember that part? So you need to turn that in on the server today to actually be on time. So this was our new due date. So just to.
And that's the headshot of the girl?
Just the knockout parts were what 5.2 was. The retouching is assignment 7 point something.
What if they're the same font?
Then send me an email saying you want it to count for both.
Okay.
I don't mind doing all of that stuff. It's not my job to do the housekeeping part of it all, the like renaming files and moving shit and all that kind of stuff. So here, let me show you what it looks like. Is anybody having trouble getting on the server? Yeah, so Mark, you weren't here last week, so you need to change. This is what you need to change. So if you go to the server address, the one we typically went to, it was an AFP, was the first three letters. You need to change that AFP to SMB, Sam, Mary, Bob, and then it should work. And you should go ahead and make a favorite for that as well. All the AFP servers are gone. Did that work? It should then ask you to put in your credentials again. It'll be your username for Columbia and then your normal password. Is anybody else having problems, or is everybody else in? Okay, good on that part. All right, so this is the ones that I've gotten so far, just to show you. This is what actually reminded me of it. So there's a lot of people, like Kat right here is putting in a 5.2 and a 7.1. It's the same image, it's just that the 7.1 is the fully retouched one, and the 5.2 one is the one that's just got hers knocked out from the background. In theory, that would have given you more time, but it just, because we didn't get to the strategies for doing that knock-up back in the 5th week, it fell into all of this. But it's simple to do, so. Can I do what? Oh, yeah. So it's the same as the old one. It's just that the first three letters are different. So I'll read it out to you really quickly. So are you in a good spot? Okay. So S is in Sam, M is in Mary, B is in Bob, colon, //172.20.208.221. And then, like I say, if you hit the little plus button down here, I can't hit mine because I've already got a favorite of it. It'll remember it for you, so that if it gets scrambled or you connect to a different server for some other reason, it'll always be there for you and you can go back to it. Supposedly, they're supposed to be getting us up on a bigger, more robust server, which would be great. But as long as they've got this guy working again, we'll be fine. Oh, and to that end, everything is up to date grade-wise, I think. If I've missed something, if somebody turned something in and you're like, hey, wait, I turned that in and on time and all that kind of stuff. There was that whole period where we were doing shit on a hard drive because we couldn't get to the server and all that kind of stuff. If stuff got lost or confused and all of that, I trust all of you implicitly. Just let me know, turn in the work, and just say this was done on time, and I will go back and fix your grade. Is that okay? We good on that part? All right. So I want to take a quick look at some of the stuff that did get turned in for 6-1. It was the initial tonal retouching part. Proved to be a challenge. So let me take care of that. Jordan, can you do me a favor and start me sign in? Thanks. Oh, did you guys get the email about downgrading Photoshop? Oh, changed my life. So do what you want. But when I downgraded, and it's only 2 steps, so it's the version of Photoshop that was around, probably 3 or 4 months ago. Everything worked again. So including my history snapshots worked again. My the setup for the mixer brush worked again. I mean, everything worked again. So just that would be my suggestion. I have not tested the brand new version of it right now. I really don't want to do that in the middle of this semester because that's just asking for a world of hurt. So this is what I'm going to stay on from now on. But do whatever you want. I'm just throwing that out there for you. Okay. Okie dokie. So I do want to look at a couple of things here really quickly. This is, you can see, everybody can see because they're all named here. Anyway, this is Kirsten's right here. And what I wanted to look at was here. So if you take a look at her layers palette over here, I'm going to show you what this looks like starting from the beginning. So I'm going to hold down my Option key and click on just the beginning. So this is the original image. It's the only thing that we can see. And so then she goes to actually add some hair here to actually fill in those blanks, and that part was actually really good. And then there's a second version of that to actually continue this process a little bit more, and that's also good. But then we get to her pixel retouching layer, and if you turn it on, you can see that it is allowing those pieces of hair to show through because she's got a layer mask on this. I'm going to temporarily turn the mask off, and you can see this image itself doesn't have any of these hair fixes in it, but it does have a layer mask that's sort of allowing that to show through, and it's a workable thing. I mean, it's a doable thing. But for me, especially when we get to where we're going right now, in terms of doing really more hardcore manipulation of the whole image, this can start to be a problem. You want kind of to have all of your retouching, all of the pixel work done on a single layer. When it's split up like this, I mean, imagine, I can't do split frequency on this because I need all three of these to be together before I actually have a new version to do that with. Does that make sense, everyone? So that's what my problem ends up becoming here for this. So the easiest way I know to try to fix this, I'm going to show you how I would go about doing this just to bring it all into one. I'm going to expand my layers palette so you can really see what I'm actually gonna do. I'm going to bring these retouch layers up above, and then I am going to take the mask itself, and I'm going to drag up one copy of it so that begins to get what I need, and then I'm going to command click to load this as another. I've just loaded the mask as a selection, and I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm also going to add it there. So this is what I've got, which totally fucks this thing up. So how can I fix this part? I know how I'm going to do it. So forget that. I'm going to go back to the way it looked in the very beginning. So this is the way it looks in the very beginning. I'm going to turn off all of the tonal retouching that's up above. So the only thing that we are looking at right now is the pixel retouching. So the masks are in place. They're doing their job. The other layers are on there. All of that's doing its job. So at this stage of the game, I'm just going to do a merge stamp version of this. So again, remember, this is a shortcut that you're going to have to memorize. There's no way of getting around it, but you're going to use this thing over and over for the rest of your life. And the command keyboard shortcut, so again, you only want to turn on layers that you want to be part of this. I don't want my tonal stuff to be part of this. I want to keep that separate and on top so that I can continue to edit it. I just want a composite of all of the retouching on the pixel level. That's all I really want on this. So selecting the very top level right here, this one that says Pixel Retouch, I'm going to hold down the Command, Option, Shift key, those three keys, Command, Option, Shift, Control, Option, Shift if you're on on Windows, and hit the E key. This does a merge stamp version, so everything that was visible is now on this. But you can see none of my tonal stuff is a part of it because none of it was turned on. None of it was visible when I did that. Make sense? Then I'm going to get rid of these other layers right here, and I'm going to rename this Pixel Retouch. And then I can turn on all of my tonal layers, and I'm off to the races. Does that make sense what just happened? Okay, I do want to show you one other thing about it that I had a problem with, and it's if you take a look at the layer mask, to look at your layer masks by themselves, hold down the Option key and click on the layer mask, and you can see this is problematic. So I'm going to get my workspace back to where it was. And I say all of this, it was really well done. So, I mean, overall, it was really well done, but these are just things I can point out that other people were struggling with. But if you take a look at the mask itself, you can see that there's actually holes in the mask. This is the mask that is controlling what of the hair we actually see. So again, if I turn the mask off, That's what it's controlling, that hair, that part of the hair part. But if you take a look at the mask itself, you can see there are holes in this mask. See where this white space is all in here? That's old texture coming through. So now we are mixing texture that does not line up. There's hair that's in these small little white spaces that are in here that does not line up at all with the hair that's actually being added or subtracted. And then all of a sudden it just dead ends right here. This dead ends in the middle. Hair doesn't do that. Right? So if we take a look at it in its actual image, you can start to spot some of these things. So for instance, the bottom of that hair, I'm going to load this as a selection just so that you can see where the mask is, but you can see that line right down here in the bottom entirely. I mean, it's simple to actually see. That's because the retouching just stopped right there. You're not the only one. Everyone does this in the beginning. Everyone. It's just to try to make you aware that somehow you need to deal with that. You need to either bring this thing to a point somehow. You need to continue it all. The trick that I use a lot in this is that I will start the hair outside the top of my frame and I will continue it all the way to outside the right side of my frame as well in one continuous stroke. So I don't ever see a beginning or an end to it. Does that make sense, what I'm talking about here? So it's just something that you guys need to be aware of. I know in so many cases, it's like, well, sure, if you just blur it out and make it soft enough, no one will ever know. That's not really the way to get that $1,000 a day job. Okay. I want to take a look at Mark's next. So in this one, again, guys, I will say this. Overall, you guys did this pretty well. I mean, there were some people who didn't quite grab everything that they needed to grab for this. We're going to redo part of this assignment in class because I just want to do a recap to make sure that just to sort of reinforce what those skill sets are and the way to go about doing it. But I would say that 2/3 of you actually did, scored really well on this thing. I mean, you did really, really good job, and this is one of them. What I didn't understand about this was this layer mask is actually on the soft retouching layer. So if we take a look at it by itself, that's what it looks like, and it's like, because none of the rest of the image needs the balance of the rest of the image is a middle gray, so it's not showing up, it's not having an impact on the image. So to see what I mean, I'm going to turn this back on. If I hide the mask, I'm just going to hold down the shift key and click on it. You don't see any change at all. So why would the mask? Okay, well, at least you didn't apply it, because a lot of people do. Again, this is what I keep saying about applying masks, guys, because there's people still doing this. I'm going to grab this mask and throw it away because we really don't need it. But instead of hitting delete, you guys are now hitting apply. And when you hit apply, this is what happens. It gets rid of all of that other shit that all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I just got rid of all the part that was right underneath that other eye, and I need that back. Well, it's gone. So you just have to rebuild it and do this work all over again. There is no reason, zero reason, nil reason, niente reason, none reason, no reason to ever apply a layer mask. Now I'm going to show you probably a reason at the end of the day today about why you would apply a layer mask. But other than that, anyway, just I was curious about that, but that's okay. Again, it didn't have any impact on the image at all. So, but it seemed really like a really specific mask. It mattered. So anyway, like I say, it didn't skew things one way or the other. I want to look at Christina's next. So in this, the one thing that I would say about this, and I know I brought this up when we were actually doing the demo, but little things like this can get, again, there's so much happening and so much that I'm trying to tell you guys so fast that this can sort of get lost. But what happened with Christina, what she did in this one, and I think it's actually in her retouching layers where it is, yep. So this is removing all those little, and it was correct. Part of it's correct anyway. It was like, again, we talked about these super little highlights. They almost look like almost small pieces of glitter that are really catching a direct reflection. So they're pure white. You cannot tonally retouch these. You have to use either clone stamp tool or a healing brush tool because you can't burn this down because there's nothing there. It's white. And no matter how long you keep trying to burn white, white will never burn down into anything. If you have some tone, you can make that darker, but white, there's zero tone in it, so there's nothing to make darker. So anyway, so that part was correct. But you see these little catch lights that are in the corner of her eyes? That's what gives her eyes moisture. That's what gives her eyes, that's the reason we have catch lights in our eyes, is because our eyes have tears, they're wet, right? When you die, that doesn't happen anymore. So if you want people to look dead, you remove all of the catch lights from their eyes and they will look dead. That's probably not anyone's intention with this particular retouch right now. But so it's really just clarifying that. It's okay, these are the ones you do need to get rid of, but these are the ones you actually need to keep. Something else, just so that you know this about me a little bit, because I find this somehow twisted and funny on some level. I'm very good at being able to decipher lighting. I can take a look at an image, whatever, and if I can really get in close to it, I can pretty much pick it apart and nail it every single time. I'm really good at that part. But knowing that, I have people who actually I know are trying to knock off my work, so I deliberately go in and I kill the real catch lights and I put in artificial ones. And it fucks people up. Believe me, I've had assistants trying to copy my lighting and go, what is up with this? And I was like, oh yeah, caught you. Anyway. I had an art director once, I was shooting for Kohl's, and they had a series of images that they gave me, and they said, we need you to copy this part, whatever. And I was like, okay, that's fine, and so I got in, there was 3 of them. I got in the first one, it was really simple to knock off. And I got to the second one, and it was just like, I could not fit, no matter what I did, I could not shoehorn this girl into this set and make it look like the image, whatever. And finally, it was just like, this does not happen to me. I've been doing this way too long. This does not happen to me. What is going on here? And they say, oh, it's a composite. We put it all together. And I was just like, thank you. May I have another? Anyway. Okay. I do want to show a couple that were pretty outstanding, and Chloe's was the first one I hit. So if we take a look at this, this is sort of how I go about doing it here. So you can see the skin still looks incredibly real. This is what the before and after looks like. I thought this was remarkably well done. It still remains real. It still looks real. Clearly you spent time working on it. This is her small retouch layer. So for a lot of you who I kept saying, you need to take this much further, you need to take this much further, take a look at the detail that's actually in these things. I mean, it's just crazy here. This takes time, and you really got to pay attention to this. But that part I thought was also well done. If we take a look at the tonal retouching large, this is what it looks like. And again, this is actually done the correct way in doing this. You're separating the large from the small, because had this been mixed up together and you had overplayed the large retouching, that means you have got to go in and redo the small retouching, because you did it all in the same layer. You do not want to do that. It's just a time thing. Does that make sense, everyone? Or it's not a time thing, it's insurance, it's protection, so that if you overshoot the large retouching, which is relatively easy to erase and redo, it's not that intensive, but you don't want it to go near your small retouching, because if you fuck that up, you imagine having to do this all over again. You don't want to do that. Okay. I want to show Gemma's next. So in talking about doing these tonal retouching layers and all of that kind of stuff, what I want to look at right here is there's 3 different reasons you actually do this stuff. So the first one here is going to be taking care of the texture part of it all. So if we take a look at the small tonal retouching layer, hang on one second. If we take a look at the small tonal retouching layer here, again, it's incredibly precise. It's, you know, the dot areas here are making that part of the image darker. The lighter areas here are making that part of the image lighter. You can see it's all discrete little dots. All of this part looks right. This whole part is correct. So that's the tonal retouching small. Then there's a tonal retouching large, and it looks more like this. I'm going to back out so that you can see this, and I'll show you what it does on and off. And what tonal retouching large is about is it's really trying to smooth out the blotchiness of skin. Everybody has variation in their skin. For me, you'll actually see there's parts of my skin that are much redder than other parts. That's the blotchiness that we're really talking about. For anybody in here who's familiar with makeup, it's the function behind using foundation. So if you use foundation, foundation is designed to cover basically all of the skin of your face, or most of the skin of your face, to create one single color and tone. So it smooths out any discolorations, any spots, any mustaches, any weird shadows, and it's smooth. That's the design of doing the retouching large layer. But that's a different thing than doing contouring. So contouring, and Jim has actually got all three of these in here. So in contouring, this is what her contouring layer looks like right here. It looks similar to doing a tonal retouching layer, but it really should go up on top. So this is over and above what I really asked for, but I do want to bring this up and point this out, is that what that's meant to do is to restore dimension to a face. So I'm going to show you how these three work in separately. So I'm going to turn on the pixel retouching first. And this is what the, this is what the tonal retouching small did. And you can see it's really focused on that area where the skin was really pretty rough and you could see a lot of pores. So it took care of that part, it fixed that part was great. Then going to the tonal retouching large, if you click on this, you can see it's what's going on in here is it's opening up the shadows on the side of the nose and bringing down the highlights underneath the eyes. So it's just trying to balance out the skin tone. That's all it's really trying to do. And so that part happens. And then finally the last one here, sorry, that was the last one. This one was to smooth out the skin. And then this one was actually to do the contouring to create the highlights. So I'm going to show you what a contouring map looks like, but you don't need to really remember this. Well, you'll remember this, but I just want to mention this to you. It's just a way to think about doing this and a reason for it. So if we go and take a look at our, hang on one second. I'm going to just see if I can't find this. This is a contour map. And so what you can see on this, and the reason these things exist, is we've talked about, and this is especially for anyone who's planning on shooting beauty or portraiture, either one, anything where you're really shooting faces and you're coming in close on this. Typically what you want to do, if you want to make skin look good, you need to suppress the texture of the skin. That's what we're doing with all of this retouching. That's what all the dodging and burning is all about, right? But this also goes to your lighting. So in a classic lighting situation, what they'll do is they'll actually have a light pretty much right on the center, right above the camera, that's a very flat light because it really suppresses the texture. The problem with that is that it suppresses all of the texture. So all of a sudden, a person's nose does not really protrude out of their face. Their eyes don't really sink back into their head. Their cheeks do not actually recede back behind them. You're suppressing the texture. You're suppressing all of that shadow and highlight. So faces get really flat. So you get hair and makeup people to come in and actually paint the shadows back in, and that is what contouring is all about. So you'll see if you take a look here, this is actually conforms to exactly the way the light would be on this person's face, right? So a forehead and the bridge of a nose is going to be highlight. It's going to be the closest thing to the camera. It will be the lightest. So you simply make those areas lighter. is you want a forehead to recede back or cheeks to recede back or your nose to actually recede back. You put shadows on the side to indicate that depth. Does that make sense, what we're doing here? So it's a trick that you do. So either you have to do this with hair and makeup or a retoucher has to do this, or both. And the contouring map ends up being the same for every single person. It's always the same thing. You're trying to, so when you're thinking about how do I do contouring, what you think about, I need to make the things that are closest to my lens lighter and the things that are farthest away from my lens darker. And that will restore it. So it's just look at a face and you'll know how to do it. You don't have to remember these maps. You can just see, though, that's basically what's actually happening on all of this. Does this make sense, everyone? And there's a billion in there. I've got 50 of these contour maps, whatever, and they're all always the same. Are there questions about this part? All right. One more to show you, and then we're going to jump into it. I cannot get to the rest of my window. So cats was the last one that I did want to show you guys. Get rid of this right here. And again, when I take a look at this, I think, okay, this looks, this looks real. This looks like really good skin. I like this part right here. I maybe would have pushed it slightly further, just a little bit more, but I thought this really got into the ballpark. If you take a look again at the retouching layer by itself, this is what it looks like. It tends to be a little bit, the one thing I will say about this that I run into this a lot is that a lot of times if you take a look at your retouching layer alone, you see that this is really sort of dominated by a lightning part of it all. That's what's leaving the little bit of texture that's actually left in here is when we actually take a look at this, some of the little white dots in here, actually, if those were made a little bit darker, it would be just that much smoother. So again, a lot of times I'm looking at that because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to make the things that are too dark a little bit lighter and the things that are too light a little bit darker to hit somewhere in the middle. But the middle is always really hard to find because you're never working on the middle. You're only ever working on the light shit and the dark stuff, right? So anyway, it's just, so that's why a lot of times I'll go in and simply look at the layer by itself and say, oh, okay, this seems to be really dominated by my light. Maybe I need to balance this out just a little bit more. That part. And then finally, this was the tonal retouching large layer part right here. And I thought this was maybe the best one that I saw in the group. So you guys can actually see what we're talking about with this tonal retouching large layer right now. You can see when I turn this thing on and off that it's taking the darker areas that under her eyes, it's smoothing that part out just a little bit. This is what her mask looks like right here. You can see it's parts of it are, it's where it's needed, it's heavier. Other parts, it's a little bit more subtle. Does that make sense, everyone, what we're trying to do here? Are we good on this part? Any questions about this? All right, we can close this up. What I'd like everybody to do is start with a virgin copy of this. If you've got a copy that you've been working on, that's fine. Just duplicate it, get something open. I don't want to screw up your work is what I'm trying to say. I just want an image that we can work on all the same. So you can go back to the original in our session number 6 and start from there. Like I said, if you've already done a whole bunch of retouching on an image, just make a copy of it, yeah, and we'll be off to the races. Okay, so we are going to start. I'm actually going to start with this area up on her cheek right here. I'm going to start where the cigarette burn is as well. We're going to go through that really fastly, although we spent a lot of time on that doing that last time. So I'm not going to spend tons of time doing this, but I am going to do my setup first. So my very first move in this is to duplicate the background. So I'm just going to click on the background, hit Command J, and I'm going to rename this Pixel Retouching. Or Pixel Retouch. Then on top of that, I'm going to create a new layer, but don't just click on the icon that's got the little square around it with the plus in it. You need to add the Option key to that, because that will give you a dialog box that allows you to name it, but also perform all its settings. It's just faster. So again, I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on that. A dialog box opens. I'm going to call this Tonal Retouch Small. And then in the mode drop-down menu, I'm going to go from normal down to soft light, because again, it's going to be a soft light layer that we work on. And then I'm also going to click on this check mark right next to fill with soft light neutral color 50% gray, and I'm going to say OK to that. Then I'm going to duplicate this layer. Again, it's already made. Yes. So if you hold down the Option key first, and then click on the little square at the bottom of the layers palette that has the plus in the middle. That's the add new layer icon. But holding down the Option key gives you this dialog box so that we can do all of the settings. So I'm going to just type it in again. Change it to soft light blending mode. Click on the button to fill this with neutral color and say OK. So now that I've got this, I'm just going to duplicate this layer, Command J, and I'm going to rename it. Instead of Tonal Retouch Small Copy, I'm just going to change that to saying Tonal Retouch Large. Okay, so just to take this in, everybody, you should probably write this down or do a quick note on your phone or whatever. The order that we actually do all of this work in matters, because what's happening is, as long as I can do my tonal retouching on top of my pixel retouching, I can continue to modify it forever, and then the two will work in perfect harmony together. However, if I change that order, if I take my pixel retouching up on top of my tonal retouching, the only way this works is if I bake these tonal retouching layers into this pixel file. And that is just a world of hurt. You do not want that to be happening, because if something has gone wrong, then it's all of the work that you're doing is based on something that was wrong. So if you keep the layer order like this, it doesn't matter. Any pixel retouching that I do will not have an impact on the tonal stuff. The tonal stuff does affect the pixel retouching, but not the other way around. Does that make sense, everyone? Are we good on this part? So we're not done yet. You should be starting with the best color image that you can get. So when you brought this image in, this is not a smart object because it was actually a scan of film. But nonetheless, you would want this to have as close to the color and contrast, you know, the typical exposure work that you would do, the typical developing work that you would do in either Camera Raw or Lightroom. You want all of that done first. Now, that doesn't mean as we go along that we can't do small little tweaks. Oh, I need to make that, God, that, you know, her eyes are just too dark. I need to lighten that up. Or, oh, the background is just a little bit off in color. And there are tweaks that we can do after, but you want it to be as close to a solid starting point as you can possibly have. Then, pixel retouching is first. Tonal retouching is second. Color grading follows that. That is after this. So when we talk about color grading, do I want to desaturate the image? Do I want to amp up the saturation of the image? Do I want to, I mean, all the things that you could do in terms of color grading. Do I want to shift this to make it cooler? Do I want to shift this to make it warmer? All of those things should not be baked into your file. Those are discretionary things that you make after the fact. So today you might be really into Stephen Klein and you're thinking, everything I'm doing is desaturated and really cyanic. And then a year from now, I'm going to say, God, I hate that asshole and I hate his look. So I'm going to change all of my stuff to be really warm and punchy and Valentine-y like and hearts and shit. Well, if you've baked all of that color grading into your file in the very beginning, your only choice is to start from scratch all over again. So all the retouching you've done in pixel work is all dependent on the color that's sitting in there. And if you've baked in your color grading, then that's baked in. And the only way to start this over is to literally throw away all of your retouching, all the pixel work, all the tonal work, all of that stuff goes out the window. You start from the beginning. If, on the other hand, you keep your color grading to go on top of your tonal work, all you need to do is turn the adjustment layers off. That's it. So again, this is a way of keeping your work as flexible as it can possibly be. Do you guys ever go back and redevelop your files and change shit? I do it all the time. People call me up and say, oh, I really am looking for blah, blah, blah. And I go, oh, I got the perfect picture for that. But I shot that 5 years ago and I haven't looked at it in 5 years. So what? And I look at it and I go, oh my God, what was I thinking 5 years ago? And I'll retouch it again, or I'll update it more than retouch it again, and then send it off. And there you go. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to do. All right, so pixel work first, tonal work second, color grading third, then liquify, which is what we're going to get into today. Digital manipulation, that comes later. And the problem, not the problem, the thing that we deal with in liquify is you need your totality of your image together. If you do some serious retouching, whether it's tonal or pixel, and then you actually go in and you modify the liquify part, your pixel stuff will stay intact, but your tonal work will no longer be in register. So you've got to bake the tonal work into the layer that you are ultimately going to liquify. That's why it comes later or higher up in the stack. Does that make sense, everyone? And then finally, after that, your last step is output sharpening. And then that will come all dependent on where this thing is going to go. If you are doing output to a website, it's going to have a completely different sharpening setup than if you're going to do a small print, which will have a completely different setup than if you're going to do a medium print. That's going to have a completely different setup than if you're going to do a large print. They'll have a completely different setup if you're going to go to a film recorder. That'll have a completely different setup if you're going to go to an offset press. That'll have a complete, you see where this is going. So output sharpening is always reserved for the very end. And you can do multiple output sharpenings. You can make 4 or 5 layers and you can just do one for web, one for, I mean, if you want to do that kind of work. I only do it as needed. Are we good on this part? All right, so that order will keep you in good shape. All right, so we're going to start on this really quickly. I'm going to only give us 15 minutes to get through everything that we want to get on this because we've got a big day and we've got other stuff. If you don't have your tablet out now, that would be a mistake. You really do want to have your tablet out now. So I'll wait. The sign-in sheets, did everybody get on it? Okay. All right, that part's done. Okay, so we're going to start with this right off the bat. Again, we've gone through a lot of the options, so I'm not going to go through all of the options again. I'm just going to go through the setup part. So this is how I would attack this. So I'm going to just do it that way. If there's something that you're unclear about, please, please, please stop me. Don't wait a second, don't wait 5 seconds, whatever. Just say, wait a minute, Verser, I didn't get that part. Wait, can you go back a step? I mean, you guys have gotten pretty good about this part, so I'm thrilled that you are. Do not hesitate to shout out, okay? All right, so first things first. I am going to go after the cigarette burn. I always find the patch tool does this the best. So if you come over to the healing brush set, it's the 4th tool down, the patch tool. And again, what happens with the patch tool is that unlike all the other healing tools, you actually choose the area that needs to be fixed. In all of the other tools, you basically pick a good hunk of skin so that you could then use that to paint over the bad skin. In this case, we're going to select the bad skin and we are going to drag that selection to the good skin to say, use this area to fix that. So I'm going to circle the cigarette burn. Now remember, if you get too tight on this cigarette burn part, it will not work for you, because what is happening in here, this works with the same mechanics underneath it as the regular healing brush tool. It's going to replace this texture. It's actually going to replace the texture, all the texture that's inside this selection, which is fine. But then it's going to take this outer edge and it's going to try to match all of the tone and color on the inside based on what's on the outside. If you stay too close to the patch itself, to the burn itself, you end up actually using that as color to actually recolor the inside of your image, and it'll end up being much darker and much less red than it'll be picking up the tones of this area that's on the inside, which you don't want to do. So anyway, I've circled the whole thing here. I'm going to click and drag this down to an area that's close. When you do this, keep in mind that you are trying to find focus. Matters in this at this point right now. You cannot actually drag this to a place that has got a completely different focus point than the cigarette burn had. So the cigarette burn is pretty sharp in focus. If you were to drag this patch to an area that was out of focus, then it becomes really evident what you're doing. You can spot it because you're going to have this big dot on this girl's face that is out of focus when everything else on her face is actually in focus. So again, focus matters on this. So I'm going to let go of that and hit Command D to deselect, and that's actually taking care of it. Looks fine. I'm ready to rock. So my first move then is to actually, again, I'm going to stay in this area. The pimple that's on the bottom of her cheek, bottom of her chin is an obvious one, but I want to make sure that everybody understands how to go after this area of right here, because some people were using brushes that were too large, and so it was like they didn't have the control. They couldn't really dodge and burn the areas that here that needed to be dodged and burned. There was a couple people who actually did all of this incredible tight work and then blurred that layer, which destroys all of it. I need the dodging and burning. If I'm zooming into this, I need this dodging and burning to be really hyper specific. I do not want to be sloppy with this. I want just the area here that's darker to be lighter. We good on this part? All right, so to start this, I'm going to back out just a little bit. I'm going to click on my foreground color. The color picker will come up, and I'm simply going to click on an area of her skin. And what I do when I'm picking for an area here, you want to avoid areas that you know have got a lot of makeup on them. So if something has been heavily, I avoid cheeks like the plague. I don't go anywhere near that because they can have makeup on them, especially if there's contouring or blush or any of that kind of stuff. It will actually give you the wrong color. I'm looking for a neutral skin tone. I don't care whether it's dark or light. I just want something that I feel like is general tone of her skin. So I'm going to do this space right on the side of her nose, and I'm simply going to click on it, and you can see it actually gives me a new patch, and it's saying, okay, well, this is it. The hue that I've got on mine is 29 degrees. Again, remember that our degree thing, it's just, if you look at the color wheel, you start at 3 o'clock on the side. That's where red is. Red is 0 degrees. Then as you start to actually travel counterclockwise to 120 degrees, you get to green and all the way around, right? So this is actually very close to that red part as it's starting to move actually towards the yellows. That's what's going on in here. But for me, this is not a good dodging color because it's actually too light. So instead, I'm going to fix that by clicking on the brightness radio button, and I'm going to drag the brightness slider not all the way up, but I'm going to get up into the sort of low to mid percentages, 90s. So if I go to 100%, the problem is the minute I change my saturation, it's going to have no color at all. It's going to start to end up being more of a shade of gray or a really light gray than a really light skin tone. So at any rate, I'm going to crank it up roughly around, again, a 94-ish. That seems pretty good for me. But it's still got way too heavy color in it, and that's the saturation. So I'm going to click on the radio button next to the S and take my saturation, and I'm going to pull it down. But again, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you've created a very light gray. We still need color in here, so do not zero out the saturation. I typically keep the saturation in the low teens. That seems to be, it's got color in it, but it's extremely light. So this is going to be my dodging color. I'm going to say okay to that. For my burning color, again, I'm going to now, instead of clicking on the foreground color, I'm going to click on the background color, the one that's right underneath it, and I'm going to do the very same trick. I'm going to click on the my color picker on the same side of her nose, roughly. You'll see that it put in 29 degrees again for the hue. So I know that my dodging and burning colors are the exact same color. They are the same hue. They have wildly different brightness settings and wildly different saturation settings, but they are the same color. So I'm going to then click on my brightness setting, and I'm going to drag it down. So I clicked on the B button for this. You don't want to bring it all the way down. If you get down too far, it basically just goes to black. And again, I want to keep some color in here. So I'm going to keep this up closer to around the mid-teens. So I'm like a 15% of my brightness, 16, somewhere in there. I am going to bring more color back into it because I'm worried if I don't have any color in here, what happens is that if you were to do this with black and white instead of these colors that we're making, what ends up happening is that it'll do the dodging and burning fine, but it also will stain your image with the color you're using. So if we start to stain this color, what happens is that black and white have no color in them. They're all zero saturation. So it ends up where you do this dodging and burning starts to look dirty because it just you're basically putting a gray tint on skin. And so even though the dodging and burning may be correct, the tint that you've added to this is actually going to make your image look, it's going to make the skin look dirty. So I'm going to bring back just a little bit of saturation in this. I'm going to click on the S button and I'm going to bump the saturation slightly up, kind of in the, roughly in the mid 40s to, 45 to 40 to 50, somewhere in there. That seems about right to me. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Then I am going to click on my tonal retouching small layer to make it active. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that you don't have the legs, because again, brush drop-down menu is sticky. So if the last thing you used was the mixer brush, that's what you just selected. Make sure that it is the regular brush that's up at the top. I'm going to go up and then to the brush drop-down, to the size brush-down menu, where you can control the hardness. So I'm going to click on that drop-down menu. In the brush hardness, I'm actually going to crank it all the way down to 0. The size I'm going to leave because I'm going to control the size when I actually get back onto my image. And then finally, I'm going to leave this as a normal blending mode. I'm going to drag the opacity down to 6%. And I'm going to leave the flow at 100%. So what I will tell you is once you get really good at this part, what can speed this up is to keep your opacity all the way up at 100% and use an extremely low flow to do this same thing, to basically tap this in slowly. The reason I don't do that right now is that the flow involves time as well. And so it can take off on you really quickly, and then you'll just get frustrated because it's, you started, oh yeah, this is where, oh no, it went too far. Keeping it with the flow all the way up at 100% and the opacity down, it really forces you to actually make marks on your tablet repeatedly in order for this whole thing to work. So is everybody good on this part? All right, so working on this small retouching layer, I'm going to show you another quick trick about this. One of the problems that we have when we're working, so right now I'm at a 200% zoomed in, and I can see fucking everything. The thing that you don't want to do in this is that you don't want to go in too tight on this. So for instance, if I zoom in tighter on this, take a look what's going on in here. If I come in here and get it like at this scale right now, this is at a 400%, I get more precise work, but nobody's going to be looking at this work zoomed in like this, and this is going to take, what was going to take me 8 hours just got tripled. This is now going to take me 24 hours to do this because I have got to follow every single small little contour in here. This will, I'm telling you, this will take forever. The problem that we have, I'm going to zip back out to my 200, zooming in at roughly 200. This is a good scale for me to work, but the problem is that I'm still in so tight, you can really lose sight of what you're doing here. So it helps if you have another reference that you can look at to check your retouching at more the zoom level that it would be if you were looking at a print of this, right? Does that make sense what we're going for here? So this is how you do it. Come up to your window menu, come down to arrange, and then come down to new window for Skin Eyes Retouch. So take a look at my screen to see where I'm at. So the window menu down to arrange, down to new window for skin eyes. This is entirely different than making a duplicate of your image. So this is not going up to your image menu and coming down and saying duplicate this image. If you do a duplicate image, you have two separate images on your screen. And you can, if you retouch one, that's fine, but it will not be reflected in the retouching on the duplicate. It is a separate image. However, if you do this, the window arrange new, new window for skin eyes retouch, this is now a copy of this. It's just another view of what I'm really trying to do right here. So this will actually show you what you're doing down here. So I'm going to do the work on the really zoomed in version, but I'm going to have my stand back and look at it view in my screen that's nearby to make sure that I'm not going too far with this. Does that make sense? All right, I am going to zoom in slightly more on this new one. So I'm going to treat my new window right here, but I'm going to do all of the work on this on my zoomed in version. But you will see it reflected in the more pulled back version of it all. So it's kind of the best of both, especially if you're working on a bigger monitor. This is delightful. Are we good on this? Okay, so with my B key selected, I am working on, just to make sure, I'm going to make this a little bit narrower, to make sure that you are working on your tonal retouch small layer. So the B key. And I'm going to make my brush smaller. Again, I use the bracket keys that are just to the right of the P key. I'm going to make it about the size of what I go after the darker areas first. That's what I'm going to go after here. I'm going to start in this area. You guys, you can start wherever you want to, but I'm going to sort of start, take a look at my screen, and I'll show you that this is the kind of the area that I'm going to begin to work in. And I typically start with lightning. So I do have my dodging color is in the foreground. I keep my left hand on the X key, and the X key will allow me just to go back and forth between dodging and burning. So I do want to do some dodging right now. So I've got my lighter color, and then I'm just going to go after these darker areas, and I just start tapping, and I start to move a lot. So tap, 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 move, tap, 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 tap. Don't stay anywhere. Even if you don't feel like you quite got it dodged out enough, don't worry about it. Keep moving. We can always revisit it. So again, if you take a look at my screen, you'll see just how all over the place I can actually be with this. And again, that's important here. If you stay in one area too long, oh, there's a really bad joke here. Never mind. If you stay in any one area too long, it becomes really obvious. Your retouching will be really obvious. At this stage of the game, I feel like I've got a pretty good version of that. So now I'm going to hit the X key to go to my burning color. And in the same area, I'm just going to start tapping around those areas of my image that are a little bit lighter. And again, you just sort of like keep working on this part, and it sort of then becomes obvious what still needs to be made lighter in all of this. And at this stage of the game, you say to yourself, well, I'm really frustrated. It's not doing anything. But if you come over to your layer palette and you turn on and off this small retouching, you can actually see that it does a huge amount. And it looks like I've also got a opacity change in mine. Nope, I don't. That part. I'm really suspicious about when I take this layer on and off. It should be a little bit more pronounced than it is. So to make sure to just see what's going on that layer, hold down your Option key and click on it. And you can actually see that, yes, indeedy, that's where this thing is going. But it's making me feel like this brush is too soft. So I'm going to crank my brush up to a medium hardness. I'm going to come up to like a 50%. And I'm also going to check to make sure in my preferences, in my cursors, that this is set correctly. So it is a normal brush tip. You wouldn't want this full brush tip at the beginning. I also hate this bold outline, so I'm actually going to go back to a normal outline on that and say okay. And then back to our image. So again, hold down your Option key and click on that eyeball again, and we can continue to work on this spot. So the B key, again, I'm going to do X key to get back to my dodging. And just start to continue to work in this area around in here. I'm going to go after bigger areas here. Yeah, and I feel like that's got a little bit more control on it. But you've really got to pay attention to where you're doing this stuff. It looked like there were some people who came in here and just started randomly hitting this stuff and had no idea where they were really putting their stuff or not putting their stuff. So you clearly do not want to do that. X key to go back to my burning color. And again, I'm tapping this. It doesn't look like I'm tapping as much as you think I am. I'm tapping this like a million times a second. My dodging color, my burning color. And then again, come over and turn this on and off. And you can actually see this on your on the regular image right here, but you can also see it on the image that's sitting up at the very top as well. If we zoom into this image just a little bit more on the top and turn this on and off, you can see that we are really beginning to suppress all of that. Is that making sense to everyone? Are we good on this part? Questions about this part? Okay. I do want to go after a couple of other things that are in here. So really quickly, let's go up to the area that's right underneath her red eye. This little white spot, again, we cannot burn this down. You can try as hard as you want to, but there's white underneath this. It's not like any of the tones that we've got here, the sort of like the lighter areas in here that you could make darker. This thing is just white. There's no way to make it darker. So the only way to get rid of this is to use the clone stamp tool or the healing brush tool to actually get rid of that. So I'm going to go back to my pixel retouching layer. So I've made the pixel retouching layer active. I am going to try and do this using the healing brush tool because I want it to actually replace, the texture is going to be the same, but it'll suck the color in around it and will replace this with the color in the surrounding area. So if you want to do the fast version of this, you can actually try the spot healing brush. That's where Photoshop will pick the source for you, so all you really need to do is hit the area that you want to have fixed. You have to make your brush considerably smaller to cover this area. And then you'll see that you don't have anything up here that will allow you to restrict the blending mode of this. All we really need to do is make this thing darker. So I'm going to see what it looks like doing it with the spot healing brush tool, but I'm also going to see what it does using the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to simply, again, working on your pixel retouching layer, because this is pixel retouching layer, I'm just going to scrub over that little area. And you can see when I did that, it actually put it in, but it also left behind a small little white dot. Look at this on mine. So this is what happened to mine. Watch this area right here. So that's what it looked like, that's what it looks like now. That's what it looked like, that's what it looks like now. So somehow I'm still keeping part of that white part, and I also don't like the fact that the area that it's replaced this there is considerably darker. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and instead I'm going to go after my clone stamp tool. So with the clone stamp tool, I'm going to pick the clone stamp tool. Now, we've already talked about when you are using the clone stamp tool in frequency separation, you want it to be pretty hard. I typically work up in the mid 80s in terms of the hardness of mine. I'm going to make it a little bit softer here only because I want to use blending modes to really control the fall off of this. So to do that, again, I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. I'm going to hover over this, and my brush is about the right size for this. Maybe it needs to be slightly bigger. But I am going to change the blending mode of this from normal down to lighten, because that's all I want to do. I don't want to change any of the color around this. So if I sample a color around this, so I'm going to hover over the area right underneath that little white dot. I'm going to hold down the Option key and click to sample it. So this is going to be my source. And then when I paint over my other one up here, it does not do anything because I said I wanted to lighten it. That was stupid. I actually want to make that darker. I want to make the little white dot darker. So I need to do the darken blend mode, but at least I know that this is working. So again, I'm going to sample the same area again, and then I'm going to paint over that part right here. And you can see it becomes flawless. It's invisible. And the only thing that got changed was that little white dot, because the blending mode said, well, the area you're using to clone is identical to the area that's around that little white dot, so we're not going to change anything around the little white dot. We're just going to change the white dot itself. Does that make sense, everyone? Are we good on this part? Okie dokie. Then finally, I'm going to zip back out. I can get rid of my second view of this. It doesn't matter which view you get rid of. it's not one has one thing and one has another. It doesn't have any of that stuff. I am going to go to my tonal retouching large layer though. This is going to be slightly different. So in this one, I'm going to actually try to smooth out the areas of skin that I see in here. So what I typically look at is you can see the area that's right below the area that we've been working on. There's a sort of a small part of her face right here that's a little bit darker, and then there's another place here that's a little bit lighter. I need to smooth those out. That's the blotchiness of her skin that I'm actually talking about, is that part right there. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to go back to a completely soft brush now because it's going to be for a much larger area. I am still keeping my normal blending mode on this. My 6% opacity may be a little bit high for this work, but we'll see. 100% flow. I'm going to go onto my retouching large layer now, not the small one, the large one. Again, you do not want to mix those two up. I'm going to use my bracket keys to make my brush a little bit bigger, and so I'm looking at this area right in here. I want to make it a little bit lighter. I've currently got my burning color is my foreground color, so I'm going to hit the X key to make my dodging color my foreground color. And again, dot, 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 dot all along here. Just continue to dot, dot, dots on that. And that pulls it back pretty well. I'm going to hit the X key to go to my burning color because there's a highlight that's right underneath it that's actually showing it out. And so those are the things that I'm actually trying to actually balance out. So if you take a look at my screen really quickly, I'm going to show you the things that I just added. These are the two colors that I just added. There's a little bit of burning here and a little bit of burning here, a little bit of dodging here. That's what I basically did. And if you turn this on and off, you can see it's smoothing out the overall blotchiness. This is not taking care of all that little fine detail part. So this is just the overall bigger part. Make sense? I am going to go up on the area next to her nose. There's another area that's right in here. Take a look at my screen to see where I'm talking about. This all needs to be slightly lightened, but I can already tell by doing the work that I did right here that my brush is too strong right now. So a lot of times when you get into doing this tonal retouching large, you've really got to drop your opacity down. I'm going to crank my opacity all the way down to 1. There is no 0. Again, still working on my tonal retouching large layer. I'm going to hit the X key to get my dodging color back, and I'm just going to start to run my way up here and see if I can't smooth that part out. And that smoothed that out. I'm also going to do a little bit that's coming up to her eyelid right in here. That part's pretty good. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller and go after the area that's under her eye right here. And then again, if you get frustrated, turn your guy on and off again, and you can sort of see the subtle changes that we're actually making in this. And again, the area along the side of her nose looks great. You probably have to pump up the opacity of your brush a little bit for the work underneath her eye. It'll take you forever. Does this make sense to everybody what we're doing? Are we good on this part? Okay, and then the final part here is I'm going to do one more tonal retouch layer. Holding down the Option key, I'm going to click on the little box with the plus in it. It'll open this up. I'm going to actually do this tonal retouch eyes and teeth. And again, change your blending mode to soft light. Fill that with 50% gray. Say OK to that. And then you need to create new dodging and burning colors. We really only need a dodging color because we're just lightening things up. So again, I'm going to click on my foreground color picker. With that open, I'm going to click on the white of her eye. That will actually give me the color. It's a 22. That's the hue in this. I'm going to click on the radio button for my brightness, and I'm going to punch that up so I get up into the mid 90s. I'm also going to pop in a little bit more saturation, probably somewhere in the low teens or something, just so that, I take that back. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit Command Z, undo that. I'm going to leave it a little bit more neutral. I don't want to really put because it's a red color, I don't really want to put that into her eyes. So with this red color now, it's just the same continuation of what we've actually got going. If you zip in here, you'll notice that if you use a brush, I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. It becomes a little bit of a challenge where you can actually come in on this. So I'm actually doing a pretty good job on this layer right here. And again, if I turn my eyeball on and off, you can actually see nothing. So I'm going to crank my opacity up to like 6-7%, somewhere in there. And we'll do this again. Yeah, and that seems to actually be better in here. So it's the same trick, guys. Doing this tonal work, you can do it on anything. You can do it on food. You could do it on bananas. You could do it on watermelon. You can do it on skin. Obviously, you can do it on brick buildings. You can do it on grass. You can do it on skies. You can do it on clouds. You can do it on metal. You can do it anywhere. So do not think that this is only a skin retouching type of thing. This applies to everything. You just need to resample foreground and background. Your dodging and burning colors are dependent on what you're dodging and burning. So anyway, this is a lightning eye for me, so I'm going to turn this on and off, and you can see it is a believable, clean, open up kind of eye thing on here. Are we good on this part? All right, then finally the last thing we're going to do, and then we'll take a quick break. I do want to do the hair fix in this. So I'm going to come back down to my pixel retouching layer. Again, that's where this whole thing will actually happen. So to start with my pixel retouch layer, you want to select as much hair as you can find. So you want everything. I don't care about the hair on the side of her face, back by her ear. That's not what I'm talking about. But it is all the stuff in the front. So I'm going to grab everything in the front. So with your pixel retouching layer active, hit the L key to get the lasso tool and simply drag out a big old selection of all of this so that you get all of the hair. I've got a little bit of her eye, and that part doesn't matter. I'm going to use this as my patch material. So that's what I'm going to go for here. So I'm going to jump that to its own layer, Command J. And then again, for me, I need to actually modify this so that I do not get a repeating pattern. If I actually use it as it is right now, I simply move it over and paint and to cover up this hole that's in her face right here, in her head right here. That's not going to actually work for me because I will see the exact hair that I came from in doing that. So to see what I mean, if you hold down the Option key and you click on the eyeball of this, this is what it looks like, but it's exactly what I've got. So I need to modify this. So I'm going to just do it while I'm watching it by itself. Command T will bring up the transform dialog box. And the first thing I always do is put a little bit of angle in it. And then I'm going to stretch mine way out to really try to change the whole vibe of it all. I'm going to then crush it a little bit more so that even if I get something of a repeating pattern, what I'm really seeing in here is largely, it'll be the same coloration or whatever, but it's just a thinner area of it. And you can't really tell that I've made her hair, that every single strand of her hair is thinner, but that's really what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark to do that. However, this isn't quite enough for me. I want to actually make sure that this hair goes outside the top of my frame, but I can't do that unless I'm on the pasteboard. So you hit the F key to get to the pasteboard, and now Command T will allow me to transform, and I can actually drag this up higher so that my so that anything I do from the top to the bottom will actually be pretty much included in this entirely. Does that make sense to everybody what I just did? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. I'm going to turn on my pixel retouching layer. So this is what I've got going on here, and I can't really see where this thing belongs. So I am going to put a black layer mask on this retouching layer. I'm not going to bother renaming this layer number 1 hair fix because I'm going to merge it right down into my pixel retouching layer as soon as I do it. So I'm not going to bother to take the time out to do that part. So what I do want to do though is I want to put an opaque layer mask on here so I know where the hole in her hair is to actually fix it. So to do that, I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on Add Layer Mask. It puts on a black one. I'm going to hit the B key then to get a brush tool, and you will notice now that your foreground and your background colors are no longer the colors that we were using to dodge and burn the skin or to dodge and burn the eye. What happens here is that when you work on a layer mask can only have shades of gray on it. It cannot have color on it. So these things change when you actually go. To see what I mean, click on the pixel content layer as well, and you'll see that your colors change back completely to the dark burning color of the skin and the lighter dodging color of her eye. But if you click on the layer mask, these things change because again, you cannot have color in a layer mask. So this is kind of an all or nothing thing in here, which is fine for me. I'm going to make my brush larger. I'm going to change the opacity all the way back up to 100% flow, a normal blending mode, and then in this case you want a pretty hard brush. Not a completely hard brush, because if you use that you'll see it. But again, the thing that we want to avoid if we can is where a brush actually starts to fade out as it's moving out to the edges, is going to allow old texture, the texture that's underneath this, to then come up through your image, and it mixes old and new texture. In hair, it gets a little bit lost. It's not quite so obvious. On skin, it's what destroys skin texture. So I just avoid it altogether. So with that done, I'm actually going to just come over to this area, make my brush a little bit smaller. To get rid of that flyout menu, again, click up at the very top of your screen to get it to go away. Use your bracket keys to make it a little bit smaller, because I'm looking to fill in this area right here. But I'm not going to just start right here in the middle of her head. That doesn't make any sense to do that. I'm going to start up at the very top of my screen on the outside, and I'm going to click and drag all the way down through this, and nothing happens. Why? Exactly. My foreground color is black. I just painted black on a black mask. Nothing's going to change. Hit your X key to get white and do the same thing. Things will change now. I'm actually going to continue that same process, and I'm going to come over and look to make sure that I get all of the hair. And then it's this way, and you'll see I've still got a problem. That's not the issue right here. Don't worry about that. But what I do want to do is hold down my Option key and click on the mask and make sure that this thing is solid. I don't want any little islands floating in this stream, because they are going to let the old hair come through and all of this. Is this making sense to you guys, what's going on here? All right, so I'm going to click on my pixel layer again to go back to it. So the mask is actually in the right place. What's not in the right place is the pixel fix for this. I can't move them together. If I move the pixel thing right now, it's going to move the mask. That does not help me. But I can break the link between the pixel content that I've got here that I'm going to use for my patch. I can break that link from the mask so that the mask stays in place, but I move the pixel shit around underneath it to get what I hope is going to be the solution to this problem. So I'm going to click on the link between the pixel content and the mask so that it turns off. Now if I don't touch the mask, it will always stay there. But if I click with the pixel content clicked and active, I can hit the V key to get the move tool, and as I start to move, I don't know why that happened. Oh, this is why. I need everybody really quickly to select the move tool and look up at the very top in your options palette. Do you see this thing where it says auto select? You need to make sure that that is unchecked. Otherwise, your move tool will start picking different elements in your image and trying to do stuff with them. So just make sure that that's off. That's what actually happened to me right there. And all of a sudden, my Photoshop is freaking out. So I am immediately going to save this. And I'm going to hit the F key once, F key a second time. It is saved. I'm going to quit Photoshop. All right, this is the second crash, almost crash that I've had. Mark, you're in luck. During the Capture One lecture in assisting, after 2 hours of lecture, my computer froze up and I thought I'd lost the entire recording. But I managed to salvage it, so it's back again. But I think my computer is showing its age. It's a 2019. It doesn't seem, well, it's really unhappy that I've got these, screen capture recording of this at the same time. It's not happy about that taxing of video resources. I swear to you, we'll be done at 2 o'clock. We're almost done. So once I've got Photoshop open, I'm going to go up to my file menu, down to open recent. This is the thing that I was working on. I do still have my mask. The link between the two is broken. I've got mine, but I've still got this stupid box on here. This is a wholesale restart because there's something going on here. This looks like I can actually transform this part. And fine, I'm going to say, okay, I don't want to do that. And I've still got the box. At any rate, I'm going to go ahead and leave the transform dialog box up here. With you guys, you can just Command-T will do it, but you can also use the move tool. If you simply start to move this stuff around, you can actually see that the part that we're looking for here is actually going to be something like this for me. That's going to be where I sort of start with my issue right here. Again, you can still do, see if I can get a transform up here to do this part right here. You can move things around a little bit to try to get this to fix in and fix it and to be a little bit better the way you hopefully want to have it in here. But this looks relatively good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that transform. And then I'm going to zoom in to make sure it's really what I think it is. Yeah, if I feel like I've got a little bit of repeating pattern here, and I do, I would probably go in possibly with a clone stamp tool and just try to break up a little bit of the line to add just a little bit something else in there. That's all I would try to do on this. But other than that, I'm going to leave it as it is right now. So with your layer that you've just done all this work selected, you hold down the Command key and hit the letter E, and that will merge that retouching down into your pixel retouching layer. So this is now down into my pixel retouching layer. If I wanted this to actually, if I wanted to do this again, which I could do it again, I've got a little holes that are sitting up in here, whatever. I would do the same process all over again. I would hit the L key to get the lasso tool. I would select all of the hair, Command J to jump this to its own layer, Command T to transform it. Again, I would rotate it a little bit. I would stretch it way out. I would make it a little bit skinnier here and then simply hit OK for that. Hold down my layer, my Option key to click on to add a layer mask to this, a black one, and then I can take a look at areas where I think I need to fix something or I want to change something. I don't like this one stripe that's the repeated part here. That's really the only part that I think I would go after. I'm going to hit my F key to go to the pasteboard so that I can make sure I'm getting the whole thing. And then I'm going to back out just a little bit, hit the B key to get a brush. Working on my layer mask, make sure it is a white brush. I'm going to, again, just do a really small line right down the middle of that hair. So the part where it's just that repeating pattern part that becomes obvious. So this is what the next thing looks like. I don't like where it's feathered out at the very end, so I'm going to hit the X key again to make black my foreground color, and I'm going to narrow that whole part down. And so this is how I'm going to actually approach it right here. Again, if I hold down the Option key and look at my layer mask, you can see I'm starting from one end and going to the other, so I don't have start-stop problems. Questions about any of this? Okay, I have 623. Let's make it a hard 10. Be back at 6. I'm sorry. Huh. I'm looking right at it. How do I look right at that and go 623? I have 223, make it a hard 10, be back at 233, and we will then jump into something completely different. You don't need to save it. Are there any questions about this first, though? Are we good on this part? On the steps? On the tonal part? On the pixel part? On the, all of that part? Okay. Yeah, no, then that's it. You don't need to save this. Okay, so if we go to our files from week 8, I think that's what we're in right now. God, is that hard to believe? Anyway, I didn't say that to freak anyone out. Sorry. Anyway, if you go to your session folders from number 8, there is, we're going to start easy on this. There's actually a film called Dust Removal. if you can find that, that's where we're actually going to start on this. So if you double click to open that guy up, does anybody in here still shoot film and scan it? Oh, perfect. You guys are going to love this. However, what I'm going to show you here is a way to actually do what I consider to be better dust removal. So this is not any of the, okay, yeah, we're going to, you know, make somebody taller or whatever kind of part of all of this. But I just wanted to get this part across. However, there are techniques in this specifically using, we've touched on already using some of the history brush. We're going to look at using the history brush again in this image too. Try to make doing dust removal simpler for all of you guys. But what's funny about this, and this was really not planned at all, this was actually a shooting of fashion that I did for Playboy. If you look, there's a little bunny that's sitting on that girl's shirt right there. Anyway, so yeah, it wasn't all the way most people think it is. So at any rate, if you zoom into the top left corner, you'll actually see how bad this really is. So this was a legitimate scan of a piece of film. And you can see that not only is there a whole lot of dust on this thing, there's a big scratch that runs down through part of it. If you look at the scratch continues down through his shoulder and the surfboard and all that kind of stuff, it's a mess. That's all I can say about this. So most of the people that I know would go in here and they would actually try to retouch this single thing at a time. So clone stamp tool, healing brush tool, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's how most people would go about doing it. But that shit takes forever. So I'm going to show you a way that I feel like is a better move on this. And again, the specifics of removing dust are one thing, but you need to think about the whole technique that we're going to do here as opening up other possibilities for you. Well, like when we were doing the choke and spread, being able to leverage history states makes that a reversible process, an easier process to deal with. So I just want you to try to keep thinking along those lines when we actually do this part right here. So to start with, we are going to duplicate this background. So again, click on the background layer, hit Command J to make a copy of it. Not Command L, but Command J. Okay, so this is where it's all going to start. So again, I've got a virgin copy that I'm keeping down here. I would never do this work on this layer down here. I'm going to only do it on the one that's up here. You could double click on that and just name it Retouch if you want to, keeping your layers tagged and in order and that kind of stuff, whatever actually matters. All right, so I'm going to move up here so that I can actually see this background. I'm zoomed in at 200% right here. You guys are probably all working on laptops close to me, so get kind of close to that. You want to be able to see this stuff pretty well. So I'm going to start by going up to the filter menu, down to noise, to dust and scratches. So again, up to the filter menu, down to noise, down over to dust and scratches, and let go. And a dialog box will actually open up. If you want to see the area that we're really in, these dialog boxes are too small for me to ever bother with, so I just look at the stuff that's on my screen over here. If you haven't cleaned your screen recently, that can be problematic because the shit that's all over your screen, you're thinking is actually dust on the image, and it isn't. If you don't know whether something is on your screen or an image, just move the image around, and what you don't see, what is not moving is on your screen. You know, and in my case, it's like so much I can't hardly see it. So give me 1 second while I very quickly get enough off of my screen to be able to do this. Yeah. Okay. It didn't take long. So at any rate, so that's going to be my move. So in the dust and scratch dialog box that opens up, you need to zero out or bring the radius down to as far down as it'll go. So the radius, it doesn't go below 1 pixel. This is a really old dialog box, so there's no like 1.5 pixel. It's just the regular integers. And grab the threshold and drag it all the way down as well. So I've got a radius of 1, a threshold of 0, and you could see all of the scratches for the most part. There's a little bit that has been removed. So what these two things to set is, the first one, the radius, is actually how big the piece of dust is that you want to remove. So you can see if you turn off the preview box, you'll see that the really, really micro little fine dust actually comes back. But when you click this on, that part goes away, but then you've still got, well, you still have the scratch, you've still got really big hunks of other dust that are actually on here. So in order to get those, you need to raise the radius because these things are bigger pieces of dust. So if you click on the radius just to select it and then use your arrow keys, the up arrow keys, you can just tap it in one at a time. And again, you don't get 1.5, 2.5, you don't get anything in between 1 and 2. So this is just going to take me up, and I can see the 2 is actually a little bit better. I've still got a couple of the larger spots here. I've got this one giant spot right here. I don't know that I'm going to make my judgment based on it. If it's an outlier and it's really the only one that big, I can hit that with the clone stamp tool. That's not a problem. So I'm really looking for more of the other stuff that's around it, the general other little tools that are around all of this. So I'm not there yet. I'm going to hit this one more time to get to a 3. It's actually interesting. I can see things better on this screen right here. I've still got one piece of dust that's right there on the end. 4 actually gets rid of most of that, and then I'm going to see what 5 does. 5 doesn't really do a whole lot more for me, so I'm going to go back to 4. You do not want to hit this any harder than you have to because this is massively destructive. So at any rate, this is the beginning of the process. Now, for those of you who are shooting film, and again, this is film, the problem that you get with this, if you take a look at the image now, take a look at what this has actually done to the guy. You can actually use your preview button to go on and off, and you can see it just smacks the shit out of this. It softens everything to the point that you got no detail left, right? But what's even worse about this for people who shoot film is that most of the people who shoot film really rely on the fact that they have film grain in their images. And this obliterates film grain. This is gone. So the threshold slider, you use it to try to return not the sharpness of the image. We're going to do a different trick for that, but to really try to return the film grain to this. Now, this is an incredibly fine film grain stock that I'm using here, so we're never really going to see that film grain, but what we're trying to do is, what threshold really does is it's saying how much difference do we need in tone between the speck of dust and the background that it's sitting on. How much of a difference is that you want us to run this filter on? So you'll see that the threshold runs from 0, which would mean any difference at all the way up to 255. Because again, that is our full tonal range, right? So at 255, what you've said is you've gone to the other extreme. You've said, well, the only thing that would fall under this scenario would be if you had a white dot on a black background. Anything other than that would not be extreme enough to actually grab if you set it here. That's the only thing that would be that this filter would be run on. So anyway, what you do is you just start to, again, I'm going to take a look at this still in this area up in here. You want to drag your threshold up, and again, you can do the same arrow keys. You start tapping it up until it starts to bring back the dust or the scratch that you are trying to get rid of. So when I get up to like a threshold of 5, I can already start to see the scratch again. So I'm going to go back down to a 4. I feel like I can still see a little bit of it, so I'm going to go back down to a 3, and it's all still gone. And that's as aggressive as I can be with my threshold. But for the people here who are shooting a lot of film and scanning a lot of film, because I scanned the whole first 10 years, 20 years of my 10, 15 years of my career, whatever, was all film, all scanned. What I have found is that a typical 35 millimeter piece of film that you've actually scanned at what would be ultimately like somewhere in that 20 megabyte range for a developed file, you'll end up with a radius around that 3 or 4 area, and then the threshold usually ends up somewhere closer to 20. So you're up in the 20, 21, somewhere in that range up in there. You'll start to see your film grain back, and you won't be bringing back all the dust. But that is not the case with this image. It's an image by image thing, so that's where we're going to go with this. So I'm going to go with a radius of 4 and a threshold of 3. You guys can do whatever you want. I'm going to say okay to that. And then I'm going to immediately come over to my history palette. And over at my history palette, I'm going to click on Add Snapshot, History Snapshot to this. So it's down at the bottom. I'm going to click on this, and you'll see, oh, lo and behold, I do have the new snapshot dialog box that is supposed to have been there forever, that I've never showed you guys because it's never worked. But because I downgraded to a previous version of Photoshop, it now works. And I'm going to name this snapshot Dust and Scratch. If you have not done a downgrade and you do not get this dialog box, you're going to have to come up to the very top and double click on it when we get that far to rename this thing. So I'm going to call mine Dust and Scratch and say okay. And now I've got a history state of what this image looks like with the dust and scratch filter on it. But I don't want it on this image right now, so I'm going to go back in my history again. This is what I was saying. If you have to go up and rename this thing, dust and scratch, you are going to lose your history right here. So that's okay. Click on this, rename it dust and scratch, and then you need to come back down, and right before dust and scratch in your history, you want to click on the name change history state. So what this is I've now got this image the way it looked before I ran the filter. You can see the scratch and all the dust in here. However, I've got a version of history where all of that is removed. Does that make sense, everyone? So I'm going to use the history brush to do that, but first I need to put the history brush little icon not at what the image looked like when it was opened up, but what it looked like when the dust and scratch filter had run. So you do not want to select the state. Do not pick this state. It will get rid of all of this, and your film and your thing will look completely soft, and there will be no dust and scratches, but there will also be no detail. So simply click on the little box on the left-hand side to make that what your history brush will paint with. It's going to paint with what this image looked like when all that dust and scratches were gone. Is everybody clear about what this is? This whole history state thing, whatever, it's just going to be a game changer for you. It just gives you so much flexibility. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to then grab the history brush. So if you take a look at the clone stamp tool that's in your toolbar on the left-hand side, it's the one that's right underneath it. Again, you want to make sure that you're using the history brush and not the art history brush. And then it works just like a regular conventional brush. I am going to do this with my tablet. Again, you don't have to, you can do this, but anyway, this is just that kind of work. So I'm going to do it. First, I'm going to check and see what my brush is like. I'm going to keep this as a completely soft brush. Again, the history state itself will control most of where this brush goes down, so it's just easier to do that. I am going to leave my opacity 100%, and I'm also going to do my flow at 100% here, but I'm going to change my blending mode, and the blending mode that I'm actually going to change this to, I take that back. I'm not going to change, God, I'm totally spaced out here. Oh wait, I don't need to do any, never mind. I picked the history brush. This is going to paint with history. But looking at this image right here, what do we need to change? We need to get rid of the dark spots of dust and the dark scratch, right? So I can use a blending mode to restrict this so that the only thing that changes is this black scratch line. So instead of me blurring the entire area around it, it's just going to go after the scratch line if I pick the correct blending mode. So in my drop-down menu, I'm going to do lighten because I just want this to be opened up. I don't want to change anything around it. So if you then come over, again, we're working on a retouch layer, and simply paint across this, it gets rid of your scratch. You can also go after all the pieces of dust, and you will see that some of them, there's a couple up here that still remain. I probably are going to have to come back in here. I could go back and rerun the filter and set it at a more aggressive radius and a more aggressive threshold, but this is probably an easier one just to go back and fix because this is getting most of everything else in here. So I'm just going to run it through all of that part, and it seems to be doing a really bang-up job. But scooch over to the guy, and you can actually see that running along the part of his jacket, so I'm looking at the inside lapel, the right side, you can see there's another scratch in here. It continues all the way down through his chest. I'm going to actually do the same trick on this. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, again, because I'm worried about disturbing a lot of the hair on his chest. It could be perceived as dust. So I'm going to simply click and run this line down here as well, and it gets rid of all of that and isn't too obvious in terms of what that did to his chest. And then I'm going to continue it on. You can see the same thing about, the same thing on his jacket, on the surfboard, all of that kind of stuff. It does a really good job, and it doesn't make any of the area around this soft because I'm restricting this to only changing what got changed in the dust and scratch filter. Does that make sense to everyone? We good on this part? Is it working for you? Okay. If you've done all of that stuff, go back in history. all the way back up to name change. I want to undo all of that brush work that we just did. I want to then do a more wholesale version of this. So I'm going to back out just a little bit so I can see the whole top part of my screen. I'm going to make a selection of a big area of this. So I'm going to hit the L key to get the lasso tool, and I'm going to start. I don't want to cross over the guy. I'm just going to start and just do a rough selection of the whole beach area. Again, I'm going to avoid his hair. I'm going to avoid her hair. I'm just going after as much of the beach as I can get, and then I'm going to circle back around and do this. So this is a really big selection area of my image, and this is where people who do a lot of film can really benefit. So in this case, what I'm going to do, instead of using that brush to do all of that work, instead, I'm going to come up to the Edit menu, down to Fill, and in the dialog box that opens up for Contents, I'm going to click on the drop-down menu and say History. So what it's now going to do is fill this with the history based on the history state that I have selected in my history palette. Does that make sense, everyone? But before you say OK, change your blending mode from normal down to lighten so that it only impacts those little dots, and then just say OK, and it's done. It is gone. Command D to deselect, hand over. You can do the same thing here on the rest of this whole background here. I can do the same thing again, and then back up to Edit, down to Fill. And again, it's already set up, and say OK to that. Command D to deselect, and you're off to the races. Does that make sense? So much faster. So again, what are you trying to do? You've got black dust on a light background. So what are you trying to do to the dust? Make it lighter or darker? Exactly. So you use the light and blend mode. But that brings up perfect segue to this. I need everybody to zoom into that little bunny that's on her shirt. And somewhere, yep, right above that, you can actually see that there's, so it's getting very close to her shoulder. There's a little white dot right there. So the way dust works, and it's really incessant in this, but the people who scan a lot of it already know this part. If you have dust on an image, wherever your image has got a light background, you will end up with black dust. But wherever you've got a dark background, you end up with white dust. This is white dust right here. So if you go back to your history brush, so I'm going to go back to the history brush, it's still at a lighten mode. If I paint over that little white spot that's on her near her shoulder, nothing happens because the blending mode is incorrect. Command Z to undo that, and instead change your blending mode. What am I trying to do to this white piece of dust? I'm trying to make it darker, so you use a darker blending mode, and then you can knock it right out and it's gone. Are we good on this? All right, you can close this up. You don't need to save it. So the next file I want you to open up is in that same group. It's actually called digitaldiet.psd, if you can open that file up. So this is hopefully somewhat innocuous to begin with you guys. I'm going to try to start this on baby steps in terms of doing any sort of body modification. So I'm just going to tell you the story about this image and the way it originated and why I made the choices that I made for retouching it and the blowback that I got on this. So for me, I don't know if this is true, but they say that do you find like, again, this may be for some of you, not all of you, but I feel like I was always attracted to the same like kind of woman, the same sort of like, that's the only way I can put this, right? So for me, and they say that you get imprinted, that whatever tends to be really in vogue when you begin to come of age and you really start to, and again, this is a completely different, this is across the board for everybody, when you really become sexually aware, when you become, when you start to be attracted to other people or things or whatever that ultimately might be, that you have that sort of imprinting. And so for me, that period of my life happened in a time when fashion was rail thin women. Think Twiggy, right? So it was basically women with short hair and boy bodies. That's what, and I have throughout my entire life been attracted to women who had boy bodies. That's just, and there's nothing right or wrong with that. That's just me, right? So my decision when I look at this is impacted by that. So I said, and this was in the very first version of this class that I did, I said, so I'm going to narrow her hips down a little bit. I want her to have more boy hips than the more classic girl hips that she's got right here. And there was a guy in the class who was actually, there were two people at that time who were really the head of the photo department, and he was one of them. And he wanted to take, it was a brand new class, and so both of them were actually taking this class from me, and I'm like terrified, because it's like, you know, I've got like, you know, the chair of the department and the associate chair are sitting in, and it's not they're sitting in for one class, they did all 15 weeks. I know. So anyway, so I say this, I said, so I'm going to narrow her hips down a little bit, and the head guy of it looks at me and he goes, are you out of your mind? He goes, they're perfect. And he was a guy who had grown up in California surfer culture, and it was all that classy, you know, Gidget, whatever, movie shit from the 60s, whatever. That's what had imprinted him. So he was just like, absolutely not. That's perfect. And the reason I bring all of this up is that this is the conundrum that you run into this, is that what I think is actually something that I'm going to try and do here, whatever, and what you think could be completely wildly different. Somebody else might say, oh man, her hips are way too skinny, I'm just gonna make them bigger. Yeah, I mean, does that sort of make sense? So I'm not trying to convince you that narrowing out her hips are indeed something we should do. I'm just gonna show you how I did it. Is everybody okay with that part? All right, so this is the old school version of this, and sometimes before, Liquify can be a very tricky workplace to be in. So I wanna show you guys how it used to be done before Liquify actually existed. Because sometimes the simpler ways are actually the faster and easier and better ways of doing something. So that's how we're gonna tackle this. All right, so that being said, I am going to duplicate this background layer again. Again, I'm going to reiterate this one last time. If any of this is making anybody in this room uncomfortable, or you feel like, okay, we're heading in a direction that I don't wanna head in here, that kind of stuff, do not hesitate to get up and leave. Do not feel like anybody's going to judge you for that. That is not, in spite of my history, my legacy, my language, and everything else, I have a profound respect for every single person in this room. And so hopefully you will accept that as we jump into this. Okay, so with that being said, I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. All right, so Command J to create a duplicate of this. So it's really on her right side, her left to us, her right side, is actually already got the shape that I want on this, and it really has more to do with the line that's right here on her hip. That's what I'm going to try to change. So the thing that I'm going to show you to use, you want to have the most precise selection of this that you can have. You do not want a really big area selected of this. So let me get this frame a little bit wider. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select a very small area of this hip to transform. But the trick of this is that I've got her sweater that's sitting up here at the top. Whatever I do on the hip line right here, I need to reconnect it to the sweater, and I also need to reconnect it to her shin down here. So I need part of both of those areas to be in my selection. So I'm going to show you the selection that I'm going to make right here. So again, lasso tool. I'm going to avoid the jacket. I don't want to deal with distorting the jacket. So I'm simply going to do this. I'm going to catch part of the upper part of her sweater. I'm going to get most of all of her thigh and then a little bit of her shin down here, and then that's going to be my selection. So this gives me pretty much the whole area that I want to target, but it also lets me go back into, to bring this back into the sweater up at the top and to also the shin at the bottom. But it's a small enough selection that when I use the transform tools, the handles are much, much tighter and I can get much more specific control. If I try to do this with her whole body, it becomes really complicated because there are parts of her body that I don't want to change anyway. So that's the long and the short of it, what I'm doing here. So Command J to copy that selection to its own. So if you take a look at it, hold down the Option key and click on it. This is basically the area that I'm going to work with. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on the eyeball again. Make sure that you are working on this top layer. I'm not going to name it because I'm going to bring it back down into the layer below it. But I'm going to transform this, Command T. And when you bring up the transform dialog box, it automatically selects scale. If you go up to your edit menu and you come down to the transform, underneath free transform, because that's what we've got selected, you can see it pretty much starts in the very top. It starts in this order. It gives you scale and rotate. What I'm really looking for though is warp. Now you can do it by selecting the menu right here, or you can also do it with this little icon that sits up at the very top. So at the very top in your options bar, you've got your width and height. We've dealt with this all before. You've got your skew and angle and all that kind of stuff, but you've also got this little icon right here that looks, I always think it looks like a graph somehow. And then you've got a circle with a slash through it, which will undo your transform, and a check mark which will actually put your transform into place. So if you click on the little thing that looks like a graph, that's the same thing as the warp tool. So I'm simply going to click on that, and you should get a grid over your image right now. And every one of these grids has control points. So you've got every one of these little blue dots is an independent control point. So watch my screen, watch what I'm going to do first, and then you can actually see where we want to go with this. The issue that I have about this though is that right now I cannot see a before and after. I can't really see what things exist, where it existed before. To be able to see a before and after, if you lower the opacity of this, so I'm going to drop the opacity of this layer down to around 50–60% somewhere, so that I can kind of see what I'm doing here. So this is going to be my transform. And then I'm going to grab these handles. So again, if you've never used the warp tool before, look at the way this actually works. I'm going to click on this little button right down here. There's a control handle here. You see it's actually coming off this lower corner right here. And you can see as I'm pushing this up, it's actually shoving in this part of her body line just a little bit. And you can see there's the ghost of the original outline is in the background. So that's kind of my before and after that I'm going to work with here. Then I'm going to go after this other one, one that's sitting up here at the very top, to sort of bring this part in as well. And then finally, you can actually grab just on the whole grid itself to push this in just a little bit. So what I'm really looking for is to get this line more narrowed down, but I want to return to the sweater up at the very top, and I also want to return to the shin down at the bottom. So if you take a look at this, you can sort of see if you need to move it to get this to sort of like line back up. I'm going to push this in just a slight bit more there. I'm feeling pretty good about that part. So this is what I'm going to do for mine, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark and say okay to that. And then I'm going to ramp my opacity all the way back up again. So this is clearly actually shortened, narrowed down that hip line just a little bit here. I am matching back up on everything. What a lot of people will do, this actually seems to be working out pretty well for me. You can turn this thing on and off, and you can just sort of see, are there problems anywhere that I'm running into this? And I'm running actually into a problem. Take a look at my screen really quickly. I'm running into a problem where this meets up with her shin again right here. So again, if you take a look here, you can see this is actually off right here. So I'm not going to redo my transform. I'm simply going to put a layer mask on this layer that I've actually changed that. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. Black is my foreground color. I am going to make this a medium hard brush. 100% flow, 100% opacity, normal blending mode, and I'm just going to try to work that part out so that I can blend this back in, and I can come up pretty much there to the corner. You can see I picked up a small part of it right here, a small part of the original one, the old one. So I'm going to Command Z to undo that, and I'm not going to get as aggressive about how high I go with this. And so then this is how I would actually narrow down her hip. And so if you turn this on and off, you can see, bingo, old school. Did that work for everyone? Did that not work for anyone? Yeah, so I'll just get rid of the mask so you can see. So if you take a look really closely, look at my screen. Yours will be different because your transform is different. But you can see if you turn your the patch on and off, you can see this is supposed to line up with this. This whole part is supposed to line up. You can see this line right here. Can you see that up here on my screen? All right, so I need to blend this out. I need to go back. If you turn everybody else off, you'll see what it is. It's this line right here. I need to soften that line up. So again, I'm simply going to add a layer mask to this. And so when I paint with black, I'm actually hiding this part of the mask. So you can see, again, I'll turn everybody else off. This is what I'm doing right here, is that. right? So, but I need to do it while I can actually see everybody in place. So it's just that to get rid of that. If I go too high, it starts to bring back the original under part of her hip. So I can't do that. So it's really just a very small, light little touch here, and then I'm good. Are we good? All right, that wasn't too bad. All right, so you can close this up. You do not need to save this. So now we are going to go into liquefy in a big way. So just to show you this space. So the next image that I want you to find in here is a man in his belly. Now I can promise you that is not a title that I gave this guy. So this isn't actually, we've talked about this a little bit before. Anybody in here use LinkedIn Learning? So it's on the side of every one of your Canvas sites, and it's a place that you can go to do a search for anything you want. You know, how do I use the Liquify tool? How do I do an Excel spreadsheet? How do I do pivot tables? How do I do, I mean, it's this massive, massive library of video content that is relatively well curated. So the stuff that's actually on there is pretty good. There's a guy on there whose stuff I actually look at and follow. His name is Deke McClellan. And this is the exercise file from Deke McClellan's Photoshop thing on LinkedIn Learning about how to use the Liquify tool. So you can actually go in. I'm not going to go through everything that he goes into all of this kind of stuff here. I'm just going to show you that how the elements of the workspace actually work. But it's a very long, drawn out kind of thing, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, I blame him for saying that this is called a man in his belly, but nonetheless, that's where it is. So the first move we're going to make here is, again, to make a copy of this layer. So Command J to copy it. Now, in the old days, and the assignment still reads this way a little bit, I'm going to have to look at the assignment, but the assignment, if we take a look at it really fast, I just want to see where this is actually at. So, yeah. If you take a look at this right here, it says save your final mesh and turn it in with the assignment. You don't need to do that anymore. Things have changed, and I'll show you what has changed and why that's not something that you actually have to do anymore. So at any rate, we're going to turn this into a smart object. The reason you used to have to do this mesh work, and again, if you don't understand that part, it's not that big of a deal. This isn't, but it was a way to Liquify until just recently did not work on a smart object. It does now. They've rewritten it. So because it does, you're actually saving all of that work as filters in your smart object, so you have access to them and you can edit them and you can do all of that. In the old days, when you couldn't make a smart object out of it, it was simply a destructive move. You did it and that was it. It was done. There was a way to actually save the work you did inside of Liquify that would allow you to re-edit after the fact if you needed to. So anyway, we'll look at what that's all about, but it's less important now than it used to be. So anyway, I'm going to convert this to a smart object, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects and convert to smart object. Again, this is a smart object now. All we've done is put a copy of this JPEG inside that protective envelope. This has got nothing to do with raw data. We don't have any raw data on this. We never did. It was always a JPEG. It's always a baked file. So this is simply the protective cover that will allow us to re-edit if we want to re-edit after the fact. So then you come up to the filter menu, down to Liquify. And in Liquify, you will go into a completely new workspace. So again, it looks familiar to some other workspaces. This kind of reminds me of Select and Mask. This is another one. This was a technology that was not invented by Adobe. It was invented by a different group. Adobe bought this and then rolled it into Photoshop. And the unfortunate thing about that is that, well, we come into this workspace, I'm okay with that, but there's a lot of naming that happens here in this workspace that doesn't match the exact same naming that you have for shit in Photoshop. And why they have not changed this over the 20 years that they've had this thing, I don't know. But anyway, that's just me. All right, so to do a quick tour around this, we're going to start up at the very top on the left-hand side. These are the tools that actually do the liquefying. Basically, what liquefying is it pushes pixels around. That's what we're really doing in all of this. So we'll talk about what these all are in just a second, but I want to say just select the very top one. They call that the forward warp tool. It's the one that looks like the little finger. And then you take a look at the properties panel that's over on the right-hand side. And the properties panel, for every single tool that you pick, these things will change over here. So brush size is something that we are accustomed to already. So brush size just makes your brush bigger or smaller. Density is hardness. So to see what we're talking about here really quick, so just to make sure that everybody understands this, I want you to go down in the tool part to, there's a tool that looks like it's got some transparency on both sides, and then right underneath it, it looks like a pencil. There's a pencil, and then underneath it, a pencil eraser. Can everybody find that one? I want you to do the one on the very top. It's called the Freeze Mask tool. It is a brush. So if you come back over onto your screen, you can use your keyboard shortcuts for brush. So again, the bracket keys. For the size, I'm going to put in 400, but I want you to crank the density down to 0, and then you can leave pressure where pressure is, and then simply come over here and make a mark. So again, I get this warning that comes up and says, okay, well, the show mask checkbox is preventing the preview of this. So I'm going to say okay to that. It just means I can't see the brush mark. To see the brush mark, if you look over in your properties panel, there's this big box, or at least in my case, this big box that says face aware liquefy. We're going to collapse that right now. We don't need to do this face. We're going to look at this in a different image in just a second. But anyway, you can collapse it by just collapsing the little triangle, and you'll see that there's other stuff underneath all of this. And the one that we actually want to show in here, so if you come down to the show menu part in all of this, there's a thing that says show mask. If you click on that, you will actually see the little dot that I just put down here. So we can do Command Z to get rid of that little dot, and then we're just going to put another one down. So again, just start to press and hold it down, and you can actually see it's a very soft brush. If you crank the density all the way up to 100 and do another dot, you'll see that it actually is an extremely hard brush. So density is hardness. Size is the same, density is hardness. Then what we get tricky here is flow is a combination of pressure and time. Rate is time. Pressure is just how fast the ink comes out. Does that make sense? What makes this more maddening is that if you come over and click on rate and you try to crank it up, you'll see this tool has no rate to it. There are tools that have rate and no pressure. There's tools that have pressure and no rate. It all just depends on the tool that you're using. Are we good on this part? You'll see this more in just a second. All right, so for me, it's Command Option Z once, Command Option Z a second time to get rid of those two little dots. And we're going to go up to the push to the left tool, I'm not push to the left to the tool, the forward warp tool, the one that's at the very top, the fingertip that's pointing down. So in our case right here, the defaults for this are a density of 50 and a pressure of 50. And again, this tool has no rate to it. There is a button over here that says pin edges. I'm going to unpin the edge to show you what that really does. And then finally, you have stylus pressure here. This only works if you have a graphics tablet, and I strongly suggest you do not enable it here. This will start to get really confusing because what you're doing is you're setting up a pressure and density here in the dialog box, but then you're also saying, yeah, and I want your stylus pressure to control those as well. So what's really controlling what? This is a double control in here. Again, when you get really good at doing, if liquefy becomes your only job and you are only working with a tablet every day, then this is something to explore. But my suggestion right now is you do not add stylus pressure to any of this. I don't think the tool will work the way you expect it to work, and that will only get frustrating. So, with that said, I'm going to use my keyboard shortcuts again, spacebar and command key, just to get the zoom tool to zoom in. And I'm going to zoom in right next to this guy's head. And all I'm going to do is click and drag across this. And you can see that this actually distorts this guy's head. This pushes that stuff, those pixels forward. You can also see that the rest of his body is relatively unchanged. And you can also see, if you look at it really closely, that there was a small roll off of this. And that's because I've got a brush that is got a softer edge. It's not a completely soft edge. It's not a 0 density. It's not 100. So again, does that sort of make sense what's going on in here? The change in this? To see what I'm talking about, go ahead and hit Command Z to undo that, and then drag your density all the way up and do the same move again. And you'll actually see that the contours where this actually happens, the roll off between what got distorted and what isn't distorted becomes much sharper. I see this distinction. It's much more abrupt. Whereas if I hit Command Z to undo that and drop my density all the way down to 0 and then do the same thing again, you can see there's very little, it certainly distorts, but it's much less severe than what's happening because my brush, there's so little of my brush that's actually impacting that. It's really just this little part through the center, and then the roll-off is huge. So the roll-off, it goes back to normal really quickly. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, if you want to talk about pressure, hit Command Z again. I'm going to bring my density back into the 50, so back into a sort of a roughly middle area. Take your pressure and pull it all the way down, and again, do that same drag again, and you'll see nothing happens. Take your pressure and drag it all the way up to 100 and do the same move again, and you can see it's much more aggressive than it was before when we had it at a pressure of 50. This again is a reason you don't want the pressure of your tablet to also be contributing to this madness. Does that make sense what's going on here? So these controls really help give you how aggressive your brush needs to be. And if there's anything that I can tell you about doing the Liquify workspace, the best of advice that I can give you is that you want to do as many very small, slow, small increments of change as you can. So it's a lot of brush strokes at very, very, very small movements will result in a believable image, whereas you bang this shit out like this, it's great if you decide you want to be a graphics, like a comics illustrator, because you can do really goofy shit with people. You can make their eyes spin and twirl and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is more professional grade for me, what I'm trying to show you guys. So Command Z to undo that. I'm going to drop the pressure back down to 50 as well. Then I'm going to zoom back out. And I want you to grab your brush, but I want you to start, again, we get a pasteboard in here, which I like. I sort of wish Photoshop did this all the time as well, but they don't. So anyway, what can I tell you? I'm going to start here on the outside, and we're going to do, I'm going to come from the other direction. Doesn't matter where you come from. But I'm going to click and drag all the way across the image like this. And you can see that once it's starting outside of my image, it actually tore open this edge right here. That's what this pin edges is all about. If you click on the pin edges, you will see that it yanks that part back without changing the liquify that we actually did to the figure. So again, this matters because if you start pulling in all of your edges and there's something on those edges that you need to have in place, whatever, then this distortion happens and you're ruining your image. Are we good on this so far? All right. Command Z to undo that. I'm going to zoom back into the guy a little bit tighter here now. I'm still going to use this tool. Again, it's set up at close to its default. And I'm going to do lines all the way across his body. So I'm going to bump his head in. I'm going to bump his neck in. I'm going to bump his shoulder in. I'm going to bump his other shoulder in. I'm just going to do some distortion that runs along like this. The next tool down, if you hover over it, you will actually get the tool names. So the next tool down is the Reconstruct tool. If you click on this Reconstruct tool, you get a whole new set of settings up here. In the Reconstruct tool, it has its own individual size, it has its own density, its own pressure, and its own rate. It's got everybody in here. So I'm going to reset density to a 50, and I'm also going to set my rate to a 50. And then what this tool does is it undoes the liquefying that you've done. So I'm going to come over here and start at the very top of his head right here. And I'm simply, I'm going to do a little bit bigger brush. You guys can do it a little bit bigger. I've got like a 250 pixel brush. If you click and you run this down along his head, you can see it begins to restore that. But it didn't restore it like entirely. This takes time. If you click and you drag over it again, you can see you can go back and forth on it. Eventually, going back and forth will restore the thing completely. So you can pick another area. I'm going to try his neck and do the same thing. If you just start to scrub back and forth, you can restore that to its complete original part. If you then actually take your rate and pull it way down and then start to scrub on the next area down, you can see that it happens really quickly. If you crank that rate all the way up to 100 and do the next one down, you can see it takes a little bit longer. There's not a really big impact on this rate for me right now. So I'm gonna go back to the distortions by going back in time. Command, again, if you didn't change your undo options the way I suggested in preferences to begin with, you simply hit Command Z multiple times and you will get all the dents in his head back. If you did change it the way I actually do mine, you have to add the Option key. So I am Command Option Z, Command Option Z, Command Option Z, Command Option Z, Z till I get back to this whole distorted part here. Has everybody got the distortions back? All right, I'm going to crank the pressure way down. So I'm going to put my rate back at 50, and I'm going to take the pressure down to 1, and then start scrubbing on the top of his head. And you can see it's changing, but it's taking really long to get there. That is what pressure is doing. How fast does this thing happen? If you crank your pressure up now to say like 20, or somewhere in there, it'll happen a little bit faster. But this gives you control, and that's the whole point of this. This allows you to restore certain things, but not just have an all or nothing. If you want all or nothing, you look over at your properties panel right now, and at the very bottom of your properties panel, you've got two options under this brush, reconstruct options. You've got a restore all, and then you've got a reconstruct slider. I'm going to say click on Restore All, and what that does is it wipes out all the liquefying that you've done. No matter where it is, it's gone. If you hit Command Z to undo that and bring all that shit back, and then click on the Reconstruct button that's right next to it, if you click on that, you'll get a slider that opens up, and the slider says, okay, this has got all of the warping that you've actually done in here, all the liquefying that you've done in here. You can step back slowly from 100% where there's no stepping back all the way back to 0 where it is completely restored. The issue that I have with these tools is that they're global, so it's everything. So let's say you've spent a lot of time getting his arms just right, and then you go after his face or his stomach and something goes wrong, and you crank all of this back, it undoes all the work that you did on his arms. Are we good on this part? All right, so you can go ahead and leave this all as completely reconstructed, brought all back. I am going to go after the forward warp tool again and do another series of indentations. I'm going to do them really, actually I take that back. Click on Restore All, make your brush much smaller, and we are going to introduce cellulite along this guy's arms, or a version of it. So I've got a relatively small brush. I want you to just do a whole series of little indents so that it makes it really bumpy. That's what I'm looking to get here. So when you do this kind of stuff like this, it becomes really tricky to try to smooth this area out, and that is what the next tool down is, the third one. If you click on the third tool down, it is the Smooth tool. And this tool, again, I'm going to make it considerably smaller. In this tool, you can see I've got, again, it's set at pretty much its defaults. It's, my brush size is a 90, but I've got my pressure density and rate are all at 50%. If I start to scrub along this, you can see that it does a bit of a restore, but it's not a complete restore. It's really trying to smooth the transitions from what was liquefied to what is not liquefied out a little bit. And to make sure that there's still something left that we didn't completely reconstruct, click on Restore All again, and you'll see it pushes everything else back out. So what this tool will do is if you need to, let's say that you've gotten your liquefy, wow, this is really close, but I've got this one area right here that looks a little bit lumpy. This is the tool to go after. But again, I'm going to actually do those indentations again. You want to cripple this tool. You want to make this tool work as slow as it can possibly work. So with the Smooth tool selected, I'm going to drop the pressure down. I'm going to drop the rate down. I'm going to leave the density where it is and just see what this gives me. So this is a pretty good restore version of it right now. I'm just scrubbing along back and forth along this. If you want it to happen a little bit faster, I'll crank the pressure up to like a 10 or an 8. And this starts to bring it back a little bit faster. So again, you have control about how quickly you bring this whole part back. Any questions about this part? All right, this is a good time to actually show what it is we're actually doing. So I'm going to say hit restore all on this, and then I want you to actually come in your properties panel right here, and I want you to click on, in the view options, I want you to click on show mesh. If you click on show mesh, you should get this thing that looks like a screen on top of your image. This is the mesh that we used to actually have to save. So this is how the tool works. And I always think that explaining how these tools work help so that you can know to look for things. So a lot of times when I'm doing liquefy and I'll run into a problem, I'll actually show the mesh and it will help inform me about where my problem area really is. So if you understand how the mesh works, this is how it works. So what happens in this dialog is there is this mesh. It's this grid right here. And what Photoshop does is it attaches the image to the mesh. So imagine you've got a photograph and a screen, and you put spray mount all on the screen, glue on it, and you slap it onto the photograph, and they are now connected. So then if you were to punch the screen and dent the screen, your image would dent as well. And if you were to bang the dent out of that screen, your image would be banged out as well. That's how this whole process works. Photoshop has no clue about this image. It does not know that there's a figure in here. It doesn't know that there's a background. It doesn't know any of that. It's unaware of all of that. All it knows is that it has this mesh, and it's going to distort the mesh. And when what's happening in the engine is that the image is actually attached to the screen. So when you distort the screen, you distort the image. So if we go back to our forward warp tool, you can see this happen. So go up to the very top one, the forward warp tool, and click on this guy. I'm going to make it mine a little bit larger. And I'm just going to run through this, and you can see I've distorted this mesh. This is what's actually causing that distortion to happen in him. Photoshop has no clue that there's a neck and a shoulder and a back here. It just knows that there's this mesh, and that what I did was to distort this mesh. And then if you actually click on the smooth tool, you can see as we start to run across it what it's really doing. It's removing the distortion of that mesh. And if you click on the restore tool, the second one down, and go across it, you can see that it returns all of your mesh. But the reason I said a lot of times you want to look at your mesh is if I do this again right here and I click and I drag this forward like this, but then I restore just the shoulder part right here. So I'm going to actually go after the restore tool and do this part right here. I've still got distortion in my mesh right here. And if you don't know that that's happening, this can screw you up later on. So again, I want to leave my mask on. I want to unshow my mesh. Does this make sense to everyone? There's options for your mesh. If you click on show mesh again, you can see you can do them in different sizes. This all has to do with the resolution of your picture. So in this drop-down menu, you can do a small mesh, which is just finer. It gives you more control. A large mesh, which is just larger. Typically in an image like this, medium, I feel good about. This is where I would keep it myself. You can also change the color of your mesh. So let's say, for instance, you were working on a predominantly red image and you couldn't see the mesh. You can click on this drop-down menu right here and say, oh, well, I really want it to be blue instead. And so then you could see it because it would be blue on a red background, right? But I'm going to leave it as red because I can see it just fine. So that gets us through all of that part. Okay, so again, I'm going to turn off the show mesh for right now. We don't need to see it. I am going to click on restore all to undo everything that's been done in here, and we're going to go down to the next set of tools. So the next set of tools that are underneath the restore tool and the smooth tool is the twirl tool. So I'm going to click on it. It's supposed to look like a I don't know it. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. It's a twirl, right? I'm trying to come up with a name for this. I have no idea. But anyway, I'm going to back out a little bit. What I want you to do is make your brush size so it's just so it's enough to cover his whole head and neck. So again, you can see I've got a size, I've got a density, I've got a rate, and a pressure in all of this. I'm going to bring my pressure down to 50 and my rate down to 50. Again, it doesn't have to be exact 50. 47 is fine, to just be close in here. So I'm going to do this with me. I'm going to click and just hold. I'm not going to move my brush at all. I'm just going to click in the middle of this guy's head and hold my brush down. And you can see without moving my brush at all, he's actually, it's still doing the distortion in here. That is being controlled by the rate. If you click on the rate and crank it up to 100, hit Command Z to undo that, and then we're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to click and hold it down. You can see it takes off really, really, really fast. If you hit Command Z to undo that again, drop your rate way down. I'm going to bring my rate down to more like 20, 25%, something like that. And then again, I'm going to click and I'm not going to move at all. And you can see it happens very slow. But now if you just jiggle your stylus slightly, so I'm just going to move it slightly, you'll see that it actually starts to pick up in speed. That is your pressure. So if we crank the pressure all the way up, Command Z to undo that, and do a small little jiggle here, whatever, it'll actually pop up actually faster in here. Although this, I don't feel like this is really changing my, how fast this tool is working very much here, except that when you set your pressure down to 0, nothing happens. So clearly it is. But does this make sense, everybody, what's going on in here and how this tool works? So let's say that you don't want his head to rotate clockwise. To get it to rotate in the opposite direction, again, I'm going to go back to a 50, 50, 50. To get it to go back in the, to go in the opposite direction, you add the Option key. So if you hold down the Option key, he will actually rotate now counterclockwise. Let go of the Option key, and he will go clockwise. That's true of a lot of the tools in the Liquify space, is the Option key will do the opposite of what it just did. I'm going to click on Restore All and go to the next tool down. So the next tool down is the Pucker tool. And again, I'm going to make my brush larger to cover his entire head. And in this case, I've got a 60 is the size, 600 is the size of my brush, a density of 50 and a rate of 50. You will notice that there is no pressure with this tool. There's only rate, how fast this happens. So I'm going to make it just slightly bigger on this guy. So again, if we click on this and just hold the brush down and don't move it at all, you can see that what it's doing is it's drawing the outside of his head in. This is, in photography, they call this pin cushioning. It's, if you can imagine a pin cushion, looks like a cushion, and you pushed a pin on it to actually push the pin into the pin cushion, that then it sort of collapses in on itself. It's really hard to see what we're doing with his head right here, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm going to change the density of my brush all the way up to 100. It'll be more evident what we're doing. And then again, click and just hold this in, and you can see it's drawing the inside of his head in. Let's do this. I'm going to hit Command Z one more time. I'll make my brush smaller so you can really see what's really happening here. It's pulling things in. Does that make sense what's happening here? That make it a little bit better. If you hold down your Option key, you get the Bloat tool, which is the next tool down, but you temporarily will get it. And it actually does just the opposite motion in this. It makes things bigger. So again, I'm holding the tool down, and you'll see that this is now, if I continue to do this, it's sort of like a balloon filling up with air. Did that make sense, everyone, what's going on? Okay, good. You can hit Restore All. The tool right underneath it is the Bloat tool. It's the same tool as the pin cushion tool, just in reverse. So again, if you hold, I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. This actually bloats it. If you hold down the Option key, it actually shrinks it. So personally, I think that they could do with fewer tools here and just use the Option key more. But again, they don't listen to me. So I'm going to hit Restore All. Are there questions about any of this so far? Everybody feeling okay? All right, so the next tool down is the Push to the Left tool. Now this is a tool that a lot of retouchers that I know use quite a bit. It's the most challenging of the tools to learn. But once you learn it, it can actually do what you are hoping for it to do. I'm going to set my density again around 50. I don't have a rate with this tool. I do have pressure on this tool. I'm going to put that at a 50 as well. And so what this tool does, I'm going to come down right next to his stomach area right here. So I'm going to put the center of my tool right where his, right where the top of his pants are actually meeting his, well, just look at my screen. You'll see where I am. If you click on this spot and push up, it actually pushes all of your pixels to the left. Hit Command Z to undo that. If you start in that same area and push down, it actually pushes all the pixels to the right. Command Z to undo that. If you go back to that same spot and do your brush all the way to the left, it pushes things down. Command Z to undo that. And then you're not going to see any push to the right here if I start there. So I'm going to do the right starting on the back of his pants where it meets next to his hand. Click and push to the right, and it pushes everything up. So again, an upstroke pushes to the right, upstroke pushes to the left, a downstroke pushes to the right, right to left pushes down, a left to right pushes up. Confusing enough for everyone? So the way that this tool really works, and the way most people I know work, is like this. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo all of that. Using the push to the left, I would make my brush pretty soft in here, so I'm going to keep it around that. I'm going to drop it down to like around a 40 or something like that. This is a great trick for all of this. Use as big a brushes as you can possibly use. It will keep your motions to a minimum. It will let you do those really small baby steps to do this. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger, and then I'm simply going to bring the edge of my brush, not the center of my brush next to his stomach, but the edge of my brush right next to his stomach, and I'm simply going to click and push up, and click and push up, and click and push up. And then you can get a sense for how far in you need to move your brush to actually have it do the impact that you want, but I can start to continue to move in like this, and that's maybe all I need to do for this. Does that make sense? It is a whole lot better, if I hit Restore All really quickly, it's a whole lot better than using a really small version of this brush and then coming over here underneath his stomach and trying to push up like that. You may think this is better. In some cases it might be better, but I'm just telling you in my own experience the way I think these tools work the best. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Almost done, guys. I'm going to do a Restore All really quick. The next tool down underneath the push to the left tool is the freeze tool. This is the one where we got the warning and it says, well, if you're not showing the mask, again, I think this is a poor choice of words. This is not a mask. This is just an area that you're either going to freeze or thaw. You're either going to protect and keep it from being liquefied or not. So if we come over to, I'm going to freeze the front part of this guy's face. So again, in this case, I'm going to leave my density all the way at 100 here because I want a really sharp edge for my brush line. And then I'm simply going to paint and freeze the front part of this guy's face. Then I'm going to go back to the push to the left tool, the one that's up at the very top, and I'm just going to repeatedly start hammering it down against this freeze mark here. Now mine's not happening that fast because again I've got a slow rate on this, so I'm going to crank my rate up even more, and I'm just going to continue to smack this against that freeze area. And you can see because the area is frozen, I can't do anything to it. So if you uncheck the show mask in your properties panel, it's still frozen. It's still in effect. It's still not letting you liquefy this, but it allows you to freeze certain areas to, again, give you greater control over the pixels that are manipulated and the pixels that are not. Does that make sense? Are we good on this part? All right. So I'm going to cancel, I'm going to hit a Restore All on that. Restore All will get rid. If you turn your mask back on, you will see it is still there. Freezing and thawing are not dependent on the mesh, on the liquefy at all. You're just saying you want this area protected. If you want to get rid of the mesh, you click on under Mask Options, you click None. So then the tool that's underneath it, again, I'm going to do masking again. So, oops, sorry. I'm going to freeze an area again. I'm just going to freeze a big area of this guy like this. So let's say, well, you've frozen this area and it's great, but you want to thaw out. You want to still be able to work on his shoulder. That is the next tool down. It is the thaw tool. So if you go to the next tool down, again, it has all its own settings. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And then you simply paint over this area to remove the brush stroke from that. So now his neck and his head are frozen, but his shoulder and the rest of his body are not. Does that make sense with what we're doing here? So again, if you were to come over to the push to the left tool and try to hammer up against this, you can see it will stop on the line where the freeze actually happens. Are we good on this? All right, I'm going to hit Restore All. And then I'm going to hit None to get rid of my mask. If there's a trick to doing masking though, so let's say that you want to freeze an enormous part of this image and only thaw out a small part to manipulate. You could paint the entire image, but it takes too long. So instead what you do is you simply come over to this button, the next one over, you hit Mask All. That will cover your entire image with a freeze mask, and then you simply take the Thaw tool and say, well, I only really want to be able to work on his head. So this is now frozen the entire image, but allowed his head to actually be manipulated. If you want just the inverse of this, you click on the Invert All tool and it will do just the opposite. It'll freeze his head and thaw everybody else. So these are just tools to make it faster. If you can't remember them, don't worry about it. Just go in and paint the whole image. It'll take time, and then thaw out what you need to, and you should be good to go. Are we good on this part? We're almost done, team. All right, so I'm going to hit back in here like this. I'm going to go to None for my mask to go back. I don't have a Restore All because I haven't done anything to the mask right now. So these are the things that we're going to ultimately do in here. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things, show you how I would do those things to actually think about some of this stuff, and then we'll sort of take it from here. We'll look at the next version, and we may have time to do faces here, but if not, at least we'll get through the main part of all of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to take away a bit of his belly. That's how I'm going to go after this part. So I'm going to zoom into this area, not that much. I am going to start with the Forward Warp tool. I'm going to make it extremely large. So in my case, it's around 700 pixels. I am going to reset this to a pressure of 50 and a density of 50, and then I'm simply going to start working my way along this line, just doing small little taps in here, just to sort of try to start to bring this thing in. So I am tapping now the same way that I actually tapped using my when we were doing tonal retouching. What you'll see is I just accidentally pulled the front of his pants slightly down. If you're not sure of what just happened, again, click on Show Your Mesh and zoom in here, and you can actually see this downward motion that happened right in here. This part right in here just happened. I don't want that to actually be the case here. So I'm rethinking this whole tool to begin with. So instead, I'm going to do a Restore All. I'm going to uncheck Show My Mesh, and I'm going to go after the Push to the Left tool and better, because I think it's a better tool for this. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. Again, this is a pressure of 40, a density of 40, so middle on all of these. And I'm just going to start tapping and pushing up slightly here to actually try to narrow this part down a little bit and thin this part out a little bit. However, this no longer really fits his chest at all. I need to bring his chest back out a little bit more to fit this. However, I don't want to change his head at all right now, so I'm going to freeze his head. So I'm going to click on the Freeze tool, and I'm going to paint over all of his head, and I'm probably going to grab his neck as well. I'm going to leave everybody else open into this. I don't personally like to see the mask because it's just, I don't like seeing this when I'm trying to do this. It's a distraction. So I'm going to uncheck the Show Mask. It's still there, but I'm just going to uncheck it. And then I'm going to go after the Bloat tool. So I'm going to grab the Bloating tool because what I need is to make his chest actually a little bit larger. I'm going to make the tool considerably larger, and then I'm also going to make it extremely soft so that it rolls off a little bit easier. I don't have pressure in this. I do have rate. We'll see sort of how this whole part works. So I'm simply going to tap down on his chest, and I realize I just got the pucker tool, not the Bloat tool. Command Z to undo that and go to the Bloat tool that's right underneath it. Again, much larger tool. A density in the 50s. Again, I have no pressure here, but my rate in 50. And I'm just going to start tapping about where that hair is on his chest. And you can see it's actually starting to make this a little bit broader and a little bit bigger. I'm then going to go after my Push to the Left, the Push Forward tool, make it considerably smaller. Because what I want to do is try to take this dent out of his body right here. So again, I'm going to click on this to bring this whole part out. I can also push this part in a little bit more. I feel like he needs a little bit more on his chest out right here. I can try to do that with the Push to the Left tool here to sort of bring this part out a little bit more. Hopefully not distort this too horribly. If I feel like this ends up being weird, I can actually go back and use the smooth tool or the reconstruct tool to pull this back in a little bit. You have a preview check mark at the very bottom of your image on the property side. If you click on this, this will show you the before and after. And again, it's beginning to work for me a little bit here. I feel like right now his chest is down a little bit too much, so I'm going to push this up a little bit here. Again, that's a consequence of the bloat tool. So I'm feeling pretty good about this, but then I get over to his arms, and I feel like, okay, his arm is actually fine. His forearm is this part, or the top part of his half of his arm is pretty good above his elbow, but the rest of his arm looks really narrow to me. It looks like a little too skinny to me. So I am going to use the bloat tool on that. I'm going to make my bloat tool smaller so that it gets close to the size of this arm. And then this is a tricky one. I'm going to click at his elbow and drag to his wrist. And you can see what's going to happen. This thing can take off on you really fast. So I'm going to see what happens. If it goes too quick, I'm going to dumb it down using my properties option. So again, I'm going to click and drag forward, and that actually is pretty slow. So in my case, what I've got is a rate of 50 and a density of 51, and my brush size is a 175. All of this will change depending on, so I'm going to use it again to build up his lower arm a little bit more. I feel like it's actually gotten a little misshapen in here, so I'm going to try to make the upper part of his body a little bit bigger. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger to do that. And this is now starting to look way too exaggerated to me right now. So I am going to go to my smooth tool, make it a little bit larger, and I'm going to just run back across these a little bit to just try to get it to be a little bit more believable. Use your preview to turn this on and off and say, okay, did you take that too far? It feels a little too far on this edge right here too, so I'm going to bring that back down a little bit. Does that look too far? That's actually feeling a little bit better for me. So you guys can see where this whole thing is going, right? So to help, the thing that you need to also consider in this is that part of the way the waistline of his pants is going is an indication that he had the stomach that he had. I need to get rid of that clue. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the push forward tool, and I'm going to simply come down and I'm going to raise the line of his pants just a little bit to bring that up so that it doesn't look like his stomach was pressing that part down. Because if he's lost that stomach, there would be nothing pushing those pants down. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we good? All right, finally, you can do other things here that are not so all about body and moving body and doing that kind of stuff. So for instance, I would like to close the flap on his zipper. So I'm going to zoom way into this guy. I would just like to close this part up. So the only way you can do it is to freeze the part that you don't want to move. So I'm going to go back to my freeze tool. You need to turn on the show mask so that you can see it. And I'm going to make it extremely small. And in this case, I'm not going to leave my density at 100 because I need my transition line to be a little bit softer. I'm going to crank it down to like a mid-80, somewhere in that range right here. It's still going to be a pretty sharp edge. And then I'm simply going to trace the inside of this. Again, I like that warning. So I'm going to trace the inside of this part right here. So I'm looking to actually kill that shadow. You're not going to completely kill it, but you can certainly narrow it down considerably. So I'm not going to narrow much down on the bottom part. That's really more just a reshaping. But this is the top part to actually push this in. So again, I'm going to turn off the show mask because I don't like to see it. And I'm going to go to the forward warp tool, make it considerably smaller, because now I'm simply really just pushing this whole thing in. And you can see, don't go too far on this because there's an area on the other part, on the other side. Let me show you this again. This area over here is not protected, so don't go like smashing this thing all the way across this because don't do this because it'll distort. It won't distort the area that's frozen, but you can go past the area that was frozen and then you're into trouble. So I'm going to undo that, uncheck this. And again, tighten this whole part up. Don't make it completely unbelievable. We're not going to completely get rid of it. But this is actually working for me right now. However, I now want to reshape the whole thing. He's got a small bulge here. No reference to what any of that is. Again, I'm going to show my mask again. I need to get rid of my mask right now. So if you hit none, it will not undo the part that you did against that frozen edge. So now we can actually use the push to the left tool to narrow, to basically just straighten this whole part out. Again, as many small little taps as you can do to sort of bring that in, possibly lift this up a little bit more. And zoom back out. So this is my preview part on and off like here. And you can see this is basically where you actually go doing all of this part. Are there questions about any of this? Okay, we did not get to the face part for this today. There is this whole panel. If you open it up, this face aware liquefy, we will look at this next week. This is not part of your homework. You don't need to use this part of the tool to do your homework. But the last thing I wanted to show you is this. If you click OK on this now, what you'll end up doing is you'll see that there is now a smart object with a smart filter on there called liquefy. If this looks good to you, great. If you want to turn this off, a lot of people will try to turn the eyeball off on liquefy. It takes a lot of processing to do that. So instead, click on the mask for the smart filter and just invert it. And it'll allow you to go back and forth to see the changes that we've made. And you know, again, is this right? Is this wrong? This is all up for you guys to decide, but this is the tool. Make sense? However, the part that I wanted to show you is this. If you need to modify this further, you do not come back up and do filter liquefy. If you do, don't do this. Just watch. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to just do something weird in here. Actually, that did not give me, that was liquefying my filter mask. I'm going to go back again to the image and liquefy the image again. So up to liquefy, liquefy. Good. And I'm just going to do just one thing in here and say okay to that. What you end up now is you've got two smart filters. You've got the liquefy one that just did the distortion on his legs, which is right here. And then you've got the original liquefy that we did that modified his body. If you double click, and so you don't want to add these multiple layers of liquefy on here. That is a mistake. Your better move is, and I'm going to go back in history to get rid of that other liquefy state. So your better move is to double click on the smart object. This will bring you back into liquefy with all of the work that you did intact. If you turn on the show mesh again, you can see all of that work that we did is still there. And then you can just pick up from here and continue. Does that make sense, everyone? Any questions about this? Then, okay, I'll see you guys next week. You don't need to. You can if you want to continue to work, whatever, but this is not part of the homework. Yeah. We should talk about the homework 1 second. So, this is also a Deke McClellan file. Sorry. This is what it looks like right here. So the tricky part of this is I'm asking you to, there's a whole list of things that you're supposed to do, but the one I want to point out is rotating her head upright. So what you're supposed to do with that image is thin out her thighs, thin out her arms, contract her stomach, lift her shoulders, make her boobs a little bit smaller and a little bit higher, narrow her ankles, thin her shins, rotate her head so that it's straight up and down, and thin her face. You do not need to worry about this save final mesh with the assignment. Are we good? That's it. Oh, actually, there's also redo the skin eyes till it's flawless. So those of you who've already got a flawless one, good for you. You don't have to do anything. For those of you who need to continue to work on that, you should continue to work on that. Again, I'm not trying to be punitive in this. I'm simply trying to make sure that those skills are ingrained in your brain, and we've spent 1 week doing it, and that's just not enough. Are we good on this part? Okay, and yeah, and then there's this other thing about knocking out a green screen and refining the edge mask on that. That should take you 5 minutes to do, and there you go. Are we good? All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Sure. By the way, thank you guys. I mean, this was an engaged group, and I appreciate the whole conversation. You'd be shocked at the and how that actually impacts my own perspective, in spite of the fact that I've been doing this a long time. It does, anyway, for what it's worth.